Welcome back, attractive and well-educated watchers, to a brand new episode of our trip to Trajan's Rome. Last time we left off, it had been a decade with Trajan and 12 years in total in the Roman Empire. We'd managed to invent the Bessemer converter, the bicycle, the hot air balloon, solar power plants, and desalination stills, new dogs, new guards, new weapons, new ships, new maps, and, of course, the agri-legions and their long-term terraforming project in the form of greening the entire Sahara. An idea so mathematically sound that we then went on to our politics channel and applied it to a hypothetical policy we intend to enact as future US president to help feed the world. We saved the elephant bird, began producing spider silk cloth, took the Arabian Peninsula and Dacia, invented the Yakchal, annihilated the Abrahamic faiths, discovered America, and started successfully predicting solar eclipses, earthquakes, comets, and volcanic eruptions. And of course, we've leveraged the functionally limitless power of the Roman Empire to pull in literally every animal we can from the wild for the sake of studying them and domesticating them for purpose, from rabbits to cheetahs, ravens and crows to bears, elephants to raccoons, sea lions to ostriches. Riding high on all the glorious advances of the last video, we'll be stepping into this one hot and coming right out to show all of you just what you can expect from 110 CE to 120 CE. But you see, the problem here is that we inevitably have so much to deal with that it took us a while to figure out how to actually approach this video. However, at some point, we came to the conclusion that there is a certain pacing we have to keep in this decade. And while it will inevitably just go year by year, it's unfortunately not a really pleasant punctuation capacity that we have to leave for this video. You see, this decade was the start of a particularly earthquakey period in the Roman Empire, where some of the absolute worst earthquakes of the Roman imperial period would happen. Just in 110 CE is a major earthquake that levels 3 cities in Galatia. In 120 CE, Bithynia is hit with a horrific earthquake, and smack dab in between the two of them, one of the worst earthquakes to that point, the 115 Antioch earthquake, said to have killed over 260,000 people, alongside leveling multiple cities completely thanks to the intensity of the earthquake and the resultant tsunami. So we can actually pace this video based on the major disasters of this decade, and exactly how we'll be punching them in the face and using them to our advantage. And of course, henceforth we'll sort of start just counting from the beginning year with everything that happens in chronological order. And it's a lot. It might well seem a bit scattered, but we promise this is probably the best way we could do it, to maintain a coherent timeline. We had to consider things for a long time to figure it out, just how we would write all of this. First and foremost, we'll just warn Trajan of the 110 Galatian earthquake, with some wild speculation about the overwhelming geological activity in the area, while also inventing extremely rudimentary but still barely functional seismographs. This will probably not actually do as much as we'd like, but it will certainly start setting the precedent. We have predicted a few earthquakes already, specifically a Greek earthquake in 105 CE, alongside some other disasters and even a couple solar eclipses. But now we're going to start kicking our predictions into overdrive, and Galatia will be the beginning of our big play. With seismographs now, we can make the claim that such scientific devices are what truly give us the predictive edge, nothing more. While this is a lie, it will stand beside all of our other verifiably scientific predictions, and strengthen our case that science can do what the servants of the gods cannot: predict the future. And this isn't our last parlor trick this decade, folks. Now, before we get distracted by all of the invention, because oh boy, is this going to be a big episode for that, we want to address the first major stages of expansion for this decade. We already have colonies in the New World, and that's not going to change anytime soon, while those in the Americas are on strict orders to do everything they can to be helpful to the indigenous, short of giving away special technologies and the like. We have no intention of letting the New World take its natural course. The stakes are too high, you see, and as we order the Atlantic exploration fleets to enter into the Caribbean and Gulf area, we'll encourage them to find and completely dominate the mouth of the Mississippi. And before you go on talking about any hypothetical competition they might be facing, we got sorry news for you. This is not the glorious group of First Nations folks that have made such a big impact on our modern-day culture. These are not the large, well-established power groups of the 1500s. The Mississippians won't come around for centuries. The mound builders won't appear for nearly half a millennium, and the Mayans haven't even yet entered their vaunted classical period. The Great Lakes people, like the Seneca and the Mohawk, won't be around for nearly 1,000 years. The Great Plains Sioux won't become a distinct group for over 1,000 years, and won't split off into their various branches that we know today for another century after that. We are so very early that the Great Raft probably hasn't even begun to form yet, and possibly wouldn't for around a millennium. Not only is there nobody to stop the Romans, probably they won't even try, so amazed by Roman society they will be. The fact that the Roman colonization is meant to be friendly and helpful, brotherly even, to the natives, means that their cultures will be preserved and recorded in intimate detail by their own wise folk. We are not looking to eradicate or conquer them. We're looking to record everything about them, to incorporate everything that we can of them, and preserve everything we've yet to find a use for until later, when we can use that as well. This is not a great exchange of material goods like it was in our own timeline, wherein the Europeans had vested interests in raping the land and taking its bounty back to the Old World. Most of what they could offer us in the New World in this timeline is not crops, which we already have plenty of and much more modern examples thereof back home, but rather information and culture. We want to know their ways, and the Romans will be arriving by the thousands to learn them. Meanwhile, the Marksville cultures in the area at the time only got a few thousand people per community at most. Roman crops and farming styles are more sustainable and productive than the Marksville culture agricultural methods, and the Romans eagerly offer treatments for illnesses and vaccines against perennial ailments without even being prompted. While certain conflicts might well arise, Bessemer steel plate armor with multiple layers of tightly woven Malagasy silk stretched over the metal are functionally impossible for downtime weapons to penetrate. While bruises from the bulk blunt force trauma are inevitable, and the occasional lucky shot landing in the hinges of the plates might well happen from time to time, Roman soldiers and agri-legionnaires in America are nearly invulnerable to native attack on an individual level. And already we're doing small-scale military experiments with silk from Darwin's bark spider, currently being aggressively domesticated in the southern reaches of the empire for the sake of higher production and greater sociability, so that we can eventually construct entirely bulletproof armors out of natural polymers. It is, therefore, only a matter of time until Roman expansion ends up subsuming the other groups east of the Rockies. So our goal for North America specifically is to move into the greater Mississippi River Basin, a collection of river networks that covers roughly 41% of the entirety of North America's land. From the mouth of the Mississippi, nearly half of all of the continent is therefore completely and totally available, with nearly 100 million bison to gleefully domesticate for Roman purposes. And with that in mind, we will begin development on metal-hulled watercraft that can comfortably maintain operation in riverine environments like the Amazon and Mississippi for much longer periods of time than their wood-bodied cousins. While we'll be experimenting with such craft for a few years to get the designs just right, the Mississippi, Amazon, Rio de la Plata, and all of the amazing rivers of Europe and Africa will serve as the testbed for a much larger generation of ocean-going metal-hulled craft in not too many years. Make no mistake about it as well, this gradual expansion into the waterways of America will be slow going. While entirely orderly and centralized through the government handing out land to accomplished veterans and military retirees, we mostly have to wait for people to retire from the military or graduate from the agri-legions to maintain a flow of new colonists into the New World. Fortunately, agri-legionnaires who have fallen in love with the New World during their time on their own duties will be able to simply settle down where they've been working. There are, of course, other ways we would encourage people to move to the New World, but in due time, there are going to be so many natives integrating into the Roman Empire that population in the Americas will cease to become a concern. Back in Eastern Africa, we're afraid that there is a disconnect in the land borders between our southern and northern African territories. While all of the Arabian Peninsula was taken just a few years ago, and so the Himyarites and the like are not a concern, the Kingdom of Kush struck Rome not even 100 years before, and stole the head of a Roman statue from Roman lands. Rome had not retrieved that head, nor had it yet exacted vengeance against the kingdom, and so it is the Nile that the Romans must travel to conquer this place. In the meantime, the kingdom of Aksum was only just getting started, and the Blemias were similarly not powerful enough to resist the Roman advance at the time. Certainly not this Roman advance. And Somalia, at the time, was even more fractious and broken apart into Arab and Somali port city-states that mostly thrived on trade from Indian and Roman sources. After the Nabatean War in our own timeline in 106, the Somali cities swore to bar Indian ships from their port, but it ultimately never worked out for the Romans on that front. However, here, Roman power is so strong that the Somali port city-states can be forced into submission, and certain special allowances granted to the petty kings and chieftains of the merchant lords. While this will start in 110 CE, both the Americas and the African coasts are a project that will carry out throughout the course of this video, with the Eastern Africa expansion probably ending somewhere around 116 CE, at which point a Roman citizen will be able to walk from the port of Calais to modern-day Port Elizabeth without ever leaving Roman territory. And we're going to do all of this alliance forging and native integration without firing a single shot. Oh, okay, maybe not without a single shot. Rather, without going to war whenever possible. Quite the contrary. We'll carry out and maintain this expansion, and all expansions in the future, through a convention we will call the Roman Compromise. You see, we have a lot of food. We'll get to just how much food that is after this, but it's very important to remember that we're founding all future expansion on this very important socio-political contract. The Roman Compromise is as follows. Anyone may give up their sovereignty in exchange for a month of preserved food. Like a good month. Probably more like a month and a half, you know? A full panel of vaccinations, a health regimen to get them back on their feet, and their children will be granted free, government-sponsored Roman educations, using the mass-produced Latin textbooks and tutors in the imperial schools we have since built. Leaders of a town or faction might take the Roman Compromise for their own people as a whole, but individuals and families may also join separate from the rest of their people. Once someone takes the Roman Compromise and they give themselves over to Roman imperial rule, they immediately fall under the protection of the Roman Empire itself, and thus may ask for asylum if they feel the people they once lived under cannot treat them better. Rome, you see, does not allow their subjects to be snatched up by rival powers and dragged back to their original homelands. So, anyone who manages to find their way to the Roman camps and begs to take the Roman Compromise will be promptly and irrevocably made subjects of the Roman Empire, and therefore no amount of demands for their return will be heeded. Service in either the Roman military as an auxiliary, of course, or the agri-legions for 25 years, or 15 years for women, guarantees citizenship, and equipment for base-level recruits is provided by the state thanks to recent reforms in military logistics due to the invention of the Bessemer converter. Everyone can be given good, standardized armor and weapons thanks to the amazing advancements in Roman industrial technology. The agri-legions take men, women, and children, orphans encouraged, so those who join can immediately sign up with the agri-legions to gain the full benefit of Roman employment. This won't only tempt the rulers of a given community, but rather will tease people out on the individual level. Wherever we go, whatever enemy border it may be on, we will offer the Roman compromise to both local leaders and even individual families. Families who join the agrillegions together will be kept together, as mentioned in the previous video. We will also eagerly incorporate the cultural institution of feverish chronicling into the Roman compromise. Your traditions, languages, ceremonies, holidays, practices, and so forth will be preserved through painstaking recording and study to be mass-produced and disseminated among all imperial libraries so they may never be lost by a freak accident, malicious actor, or horrific natural disaster. Holy peoples, shamans, witch doctors, and so forth will be given state-sanctioned apprentices to maintain their more secretive religious practices and incorporated into the Hellenic pantheon as peaceably as possible. But what about those who insist upon fighting? Thanks to their extremely strong new armor and the glorious point-and-click technology of the compound crossbow, Roman legionnaires will always be encouraged to shoot to wound. This both takes multiple men off the field, as at least one of his buddies has to drag him away and tend to him, but also allows for more prisoners of war. Prisoners of war will be put to work under the agrillegions, planting trees and doing other agrarian labor, of course. Prisoners without station will be told that they can leave once the first tree they've planted reaches full production, which will normally take a decade as they've been given a chestnut or some other slow-growing crop tree. Prisoners with station and rank will, of course, be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, so some lucky aristocrats from the enemy side may well be ransomed off for more immediate gains, as was the style at the time. That first tree will be their personal tree, and if they have time in the day, they'll be expected to take care of it and pay attention to it. Trees are strange things, you see. A 10-year tree might well reach full production in only 6 or even 5 short years, so long as it's well taken care of and given constant, careful attention. But if that tree dies from neglect, you have to start over again. These prisoners will be actively encouraged to build something for themselves, to track their progress based on the health and productivity of a life that they've nurtured over their time, rather than forcing them into a cage where they can brood on what they'll do when they get out. A prisoner that has spent a decade planting trees and getting attached to one tree in particular will be loath to turn around and burn it all down. When their tree is in full production, they'll be brought by the state to wherever they want, provided it's within the borders of the empire. If they want to leave the empire, they will be brought to the border at the closest possible place, free of charge. They've paid their debt to Roman society and are now free to do whatsoever they so desire. Hell, if they want to see what Roman society is really like, now that they've felt what it's like to live on the bad side of Roman society, they can always take the compromise. We bear them no ill will. As a rule, prisoners of war will not be treated or fed poorly, merely not given the ability to leave, cause trouble, and so forth. They will be worked harder than the agrillegions, though. A prisoner of war will have a grueling, but not impossible workday, expected to eventually be able to plant up to 2,000 trees a day, as opposed to the 20 mandated of standard agrlegionnaires. While there will be rudimentary hole diggers that will go forth and dig places for these trees several days in advance, this will still be grueling labor that will take up to 12 hours of the prisoner's day, consisting mostly of moving trees into holes and then moving on to the next station. This isn't impossible, just extremely strenuous, and will give no time for the prisoners to rebel or stage jailbreaks, as if they'll want to go running off into the Sahara alone without anywhere to go. This will drastically also increase the output of growing saplings in the deserts of the Roman Empire, with each prisoner of war literally worth 100 standard agrlegionnaires in the field after a goodly period of training. Perhaps more importantly, from a cultural perspective, these people will always eat the same food in the same mess halls as willing agrlegionnaires. They are not to be treated cruelly or with injustice, not spurned nor called names. Though we won't allow them fanciful desserts and wine. simple things. The luxuries go to the real soldiers here. Their life in service to Rome is one that will be built around building things and being built up by the people around them, not destroying things and being torn down. Rome is better than that. Suitably, the Roman justice system will also be shifted from retributive to rehabilitative punishment. Now, with an outlet to produce more constructive penal avenues through service to the state, criminals may have their public crimes pardoned by the state if they serve a similar sentence as prisoners of war. As non-war criminals, these folk will never have to plant more than maybe 500 trees a day, but it's still a lot, with every criminal serving time worth roughly 25 agri-legionnaires after a lengthy training period. Previously personal crimes in Roman society would leave justice in the hands of the victim, who would take hold upon those who wronged them and force labor or money out of them on an individual level. Now, criminals of personal crimes will have their victims encouraged to turn them into the state for nominal rewards and thanks for keeping the community safe and healthy. Police stations will be set up as well, with state-employed investigators hired and retained for their incorruptibility and propensity toward results that benefit the public at large over all other things. They will ensure that the innocent are not found guilty due to spurious rumors or community feuds, but rather will be vested with the highest surveillance technologies of the day to maintain a corruption-free standard that will be retained throughout the coming generations. Using hot air balloons, we will utilize leaflet bombing campaigns on every populated border we have the capacity to reach, dropping hundreds of thousands of little posters all over communities that feature strong, well-fed, healthy Romans invitingly waving over the hungry peasants of whatever culture we're propagandizing to. Upon each culture, for those who can read, will be announcements of the Roman Compromise, bringing health, safety, food, and medicine to all those who join the Roman cause. We are not enemies, you understand, but liberators, and bringers of peace and prosperity, of commerce and tolerance. Great leaders of rival nations claim that they have the gods on their side, asserting the possession of various different divine mandates, but the Roman Empire does not care about the commands of the gods when the demands of the empty belly are so much louder. Join the Roman Empire, and you will never have to worry about hunger again. In fact, we'll put our money where our mouths are and just give you a month of food right now to show our goodwill. You will get medicine that will ensure you'll never have to worry about smallpox or rabies or anything like that ever again. And your children will be taught how to read, and you'll be given a good job that isn't too strenuous but also helps the nation at large. Don't stay behind and live in squalor. Join the Roman Empire today! Take the compromise! Now, we understand, immediately, how crazy it seems that we'll be able to really guarantee that much food in such a short amount of time after making up the agri-legions. And we have sorry news for you, that's just us getting warmed up. As of the beginning of this video, it's been around 7 years since the first agri-legionnaires have planted their first trees, at the latest. We probably pull in around 1 million people every year to the agri-legions, and about half of those are children under 10, so let's not count them for the sake of just these simple conservative mathematics. Assuming only around 20% of those agri-legionnaires are planting in any given day, that means, so far, we have around 700,000 people planting 20 trees a day by the start of 110 CE. That's 14 million fruit and nut trees every day. In 1 year, that means the agri-legions, as of 110 CE, plant 5.11 billion trees a year. This is the most conservative estimate we can give you. Assuming each tree averages roughly 75 pounds of fruit and nuts per year, this pumps out roughly that for 1 year of planting. Assuming a fairly conservative estimate of roughly 600 calories per pound of produce, we can fairly calculate that as our calorie output for 1 year of planting just trees in 110 CE after it reaches full production. That's, for the record, those who, want to count, 229.95 trillion calories. Provided a 1 million calorie a year diet at just over 2,700 calories a day, this could hypothetically feed 229,950,000 people a year. That is getting close to the entire world's population as of 110 CE, which may have been as high as 300 or even 400 million by the most generous estimates. And this doesn't count any of the trees that have already been planted for the 7 years before. This is the projected expectation of what the trees planted only in 110 CE by only 700,000 people make after they reach full production. This year doesn't count the meat, the ground crops, none of that. 1 year with only 20% of the current agralegion population at work. Feel free to cut that number in half to allow for literally half of all trees planted in that year to just die. Go ahead. It still feeds over 100 million people. And everything extra is canned, dried, pemmicaned, freeze-dried, and buried in frozen vaults in the mountains. Every can is cycled out as soon as it's 4 years old and given to the public. Every bar of pemmican is cycled out every 10 years. Every pound of freeze-dried goods is cycled out every 25 years. All of that cycled out food is distributed to the public for free, courtesy of the Emperor himself. And we already have literally millions of people's worth of food just chilling in storage, eliminating food insecurity forever. By the end of this video, we'll actually be making and having to distribute so much food reaching the end of its shelf life that we might be able to start feeding people for free every day by the millions. The hungry mouths of the Roman Empire are very quickly becoming unable to keep up with just the tree production. And it's still not enough. Because we are not merely accepting trees as our agroforestry standard. There is over 40 feet of space between every tree we plant. There is 43,560 square feet in a single acre. That acre only has 20 trees on it. If we assume, however, that only half of these square feet are usable, for whatever reason, and stick with the extremely conservative estimate that every square foot of land can produce only about a half a pound of food per year, well, let's divide our trees by 20 to sort out the acres we're dealing with here. That's 255.5 million acres. And let's assume that only 20,000 square feet of those acres are available for standard polyculture farming. That's roughly 5.11 trillion square feet of farming, which amounts to 2.555 trillion pounds of food. Again, at 600 calories per pound, this brings us to around this many calories a year for just half the square footage of these collective acres that we have planted trees on in just 1 year alone. That is 1.533 quadrillion calories, for those not looking at the screen or who don't feel the need to count the zeros. Again, based around a 1 million calorie a year diet, this would feed 1.55 billion people every single year. Again, this is out of half of the area for the trees we plant in a single year. In 110 CE, this amount of space will be planted with 20% of the agralegions planting trees in that space to produce the area already stated above by 120 CE. And in that same single year, with around 30% of the agralegions minding the polyculture farming initiative alongside the trees, provided we are as conservative as possible. All of that in mind, we'll make enough food to feed over 1.5 billion people. But that, of course, is as conservative as we can get. Let's look at how we're actually doing things. You see, we've established companion farming very early. It's the backbone of the agralegions themselves. Every acre is home to a rather complex polyculture setup. While each acre holds 20 trees, those are only the top tier of a 6-layer setup that will entirely consume the land wherever the agralegions go. Beneath the ground, tubers, sugar beets, and ground nuts can take root. At the surface, we can leave ground cover like clover and strawberry lawns, creeping herbs, and other crops that don't mind being stepped on once they get to a certain age. Above them is the bush layer, with squash and bush beans, shrubs, and hip roses. Beyond that, a trellis layer will develop mostly on the trunks of the trees, filled with climbing vines, beans, berries, lentils, and peas. And in the lower boughs of the trees themselves, enjoying the considerable shade against the piping hot conditions of the unforgiving Sahara, hanging vine crops, gourds, small melons, berries, and other such plants that have found their way up the trunks of the trees that above them produce fruit we've already talked about. As you can see, a half a pound per square foot is going to be pretty pitiful compared to what we're really talking about here. Already using only half of the space potential we have been given, we can create enough food to feed one modern India with a couple USAs on top. And again, we can't stress enough, this is the most conservative estimate we can give. For 1 year of planting. By this point in Roman history, after 7 years of slowly building up, we're doubtless punching out far more than that, and the number rises every year. Oh, and for the record, let's just put that 255.5 million acres into perspective and divide it by 640 to show everyone that around, 399,218.75 square miles we will be forested in that 1 year alone. To put it into perspective, that's around 10,000 more miles than the country of Zimbabwe, around 7,000 square miles smaller in space than Paraguay. The Agrilegion's forest, just over 1 imperial Zimbabwe of land per year. Do yourself a favor, just pause this video and go to the true size of. Type in Zimbabwe, drag it up to Libya. Now, drag it up to France. That will show you about how much land is planted by the Agrilegions in just 110 CE. And remember, because the Agrilegions get bigger every year, that blob gets bigger every year, and will continue to do so for around 8 more years as of the start of this video, since 118 CE will be the first year that anyone actually retires from the Agrilegions. That means, using these same numbers, the Agrilegions will have a bare minimum of 7.5 million working Agrilegionnaires at any given time by 118 CE, of which roughly 1.5 million are planting trees at any given point in time, 20 trees a day. And of course, none of that covers the prisoners of war or criminals serving time, nor does it cover meat, eggs, honey, seafood, none of that. Just the plants. So we can feed the entire world right now, whether you like to admit it or not, in 110 CE. The Roman Compromise stands. The math's all there, and you got nothing to level against it. We don't make the rules, we just do the math. In fact, production totals by 110 CE are probably so high already that the Roman Compromise isn't just feasible, it might be necessary. We might have to start giving food away to foreigners just to keep things from going bad. Not that things going bad is some horrible situation, because if it does go moldy, we'll just feed it to the pigs. More bacon! And what about that food that just can't be packaged fast enough for humans? Well, we throw everything applicable into a giant grinder, toss it into a vat, cook it down into a nutritive sludge, and then dry it into kibble for all manner of animals. Having so many animals being domesticated in the background, we need special foods to feed them, and all of this excess food is perfect to fuel a domestication industry never imagined before or since. Soon, the entirety of the Roman public will be feeding their dogs and cats specialized formulae made from excess food often sourced from their own hard work. These dry goods also last for a long time if stored correctly, and so can eventually be stockpiled to such numbers that they become essentially free via supply over demand, just as with so much of the Roman food economy even just by 110 CE. Of course, it will take a lot of toying around to find out exactly what animal requires what for each kibble, but we're sure that around 115 CE, we'll have enough data to really be making progress on covering the diet of just about any animal we can get our hands on. And all of this is being perfected at a system of ecology schools will convince Trajan to fund around 110 CE to teach the next generation of agri-legionnaires how to do things, alongside honing and adapting new methods and techniques into pre-existing structure of their institution. Not only will we be farming the Sahara, we'll be learning how to actively control and maintain the global ecosystem at large, studying even more animals for the potential benefits they can offer human society, as well as the potential benefits that Rome can offer them. These schools will not only teach how to change the land, but also how to produce from it unchanged, with the old Roman practice of draining swamps and destroying inconvenient landforms now traded out for methods of cultivating these difficult environs with different crops and methods. Also, you remember how at least half of that number taken in by the agri-legions every year is under 10? Children as young as 5 can water plants. And you can sign a contract with the agri-legions at only 10 years old. So any 2-year-olds that were adopted into the agri-legions when we first started picking them up in 102 CE will now be signing in on their own contracts. That's 500,000 more people joining in 110 CE than was otherwise covered. And that's the standard every year from 110 CE onward. No less than 1 million more flooding into the ranks of the agri-legions every single year. That's roughly half of the amount of people born every year into the Roman Empire in general during Trajan's reign. So the amount of people working in the agri-legions is actually significantly larger than we've covered, and all of the numbers we've gotten here really are the most conservative numbers we can possibly provide. We all on the same page here? We reached a consensus? Everyone gotten out your calculators and checked our math? It's highly encouraged. We good? Great. To really bulk up this system, we're going to invent the Langstroth beehive, the honey separator, the beekeeper's suit, and the bee smoker. Standardized modern apiaries will overwhelmingly increase the amount of honey produced every year, and will allow all of our trees to maintain maximum production for the longest period of time feasible, around 30 years in the case of most standard crop trees. We want a beekeeping station everywhere from the shores of South Africa to the borders of Scotland. And you know what? Let's just make sure to eliminate the Africanization of bees immediately. Just get on that shit right away with the artificial selection and culling campaigns. We know what to watch out for. We can warn them. We don't have to let the Romans make the same mistakes we did in the modern day. This is a constant imperial ambition. We're gonna just make sure it never ends up being the thing. Hell, eventually we can even adopt stingless bees from the Americas around the same time that we bring back cocoa in the general area of around 115 CE. This, alongside the influx of beet sugar into the market, will overwhelm the sugar of lead industry and start directly pushing out the mineral-based sweeteners that Romans tended to like to make their wine taste better. Better wines, courtesy of our own introduction of germ theory and modern culinary practices, also make sweeter wines that don't need strange metal-based sweeteners to be palatable. In fact, with such a glut of natural, healthy sweeteners and pure steel, we could probably convince Trajan to abolish standard lead use entirely, replacing lead wares for free with Bessemer steel wares that are completely lead-free. Turn your lead into the state, and you can get clean steel in return. And that lead will be stockpiled for later plans in secure locations where it won't poison the environment. We will use this period to carry out extensive experiments to prove how dangerous lead actually is, and how it can do hilarious amounts of harm, with all of the families going lead-free quickly beginning to see cognitive recovery in the younger generations within a fairly short amount of time. Lead has its uses, but those uses are not amongst the common people, not without the supervision of those who understand the dangers. But it gets better, because we're also going to perfect the greenhouse. These things already existed in the Roman Empire, believe it or not, but they were sort of super expensive private affairs dedicated to interested emperors and the like, mostly made from selenite crystal. Now, with better glassmaking and a centralized industry, we can start making dedicated medicinal plant greenhouses that can keep us producing anti-malarials, antibiotics, antiparasitics, and all of those other lovely antis that we need to keep the population healthy and happy. And of course, all of this will be fueled and fertilized not only by animal manure, but by night soil. We've talked about it before, but human waste is extremely easy to process down. The Japanese had a flourishing night soil industry right up into the end of World War II, using urine to make potassium nitrate and using human feces as fertilizer for crops. Modern methods of treating human excreta as fertilizer involve heating it up to over 122 degrees Fahrenheit or around 50 degrees C for up to 24 hours. This gets rid of everything bad and allows you to put it right on your crops. Using gigantic municipal waste boilers, we can process every Roman city's waste into high-nutrient fertilizer that can, as always, be used to green the entire world. Nothing is wasted. But wait, we can take it further. Little known fact, humans consume and excrete quite a bit of gold, silver, platinum, copper, and even aluminum every year. Don't worry about the corporations poisoning you or whatever. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about purely environmental amounts that come through your food and all that good stuff. It doesn't hurt you and your body generally filters it out all in your poop or your urine. A metric ton of sewage sludge might contain as much as 16 grams of silver and a third of a gram of gold. Which takes us to this plan. You see, we've already started catching all of the human waste in the Roman Empire and putting it into big heating vats. We could also create simple centrifuges which will separate out the heavier particles of the waste away from the lighter ones. Then we can separate the metal ions from the rest of the heavy sludge by using a combination of chitosan, made from crustacean shells through a few surprisingly simple processes, and citric acid, made from citrus fruits, which grabs onto metal ions. Citric acid can then be added to the initial slurry to grab onto metal particles through spinning, and then the solution can be run through a chitosan charcoal filter layer, which will grab all of the metal out of the solution. After that, we can use rudimentary electrolysis experiments after washing out the charcoal beds to start plating out the metal. Perhaps most importantly, all products involved are biodegradable and food safe. Unlike many of the chemicals we use today to clean our waste, all of the processes in our night soil industry are natural and clean enough to put nothing back into the environment that didn't initially come from it. This won't only provide a ton of valuable metals to the Roman economy, it will also purify our fertilizer. You see, you don't want too many metals in your fertilizer. Heavy metal concentrations can build up over the generations and poison crops and the people who eat them. Through the above processes, our night soil industry not only pays for itself in literal gold and silver, but also produces ultra-clean, hyper-effective fertilizers that go right back into producing food for the very people who made them. Crop yields go up, baby! However, the Roman Empire cannot support this sort of industry without a major change, and we've been preparing for it for over a decade. You see, as mentioned in our last video, the sanitary revolution actually involved jacking up the entire city of London at some point, literally lifting the entire city off of its foundations to put in plumbing and all that good stuff. We've known for some time that we simply have to do the same, starting in Rome and Augustodunum the entire time. To sustain this sort of idea requires top-of-the-line, modern civil infrastructure, which means that the Roman Empire as a whole is going to have to start updating pretty hard. First and foremost, we need to enact sweeping changes to building codes and requirements around the entirety of the empire. Right now, there's basically nothing in the way of actual required building codes, and though many emperors tried, few were able to make lasting changes on the cramped, fire-prone conditions of imperial cities. We need to expand the streets, lay down foundations for eventual inner-city mass transit avenues, redesign and reconstruct all of the sewers and outlets, maintain and rebuild bridges, raise the standard for civil engineering to modernity, and build entirely new emphasis across the empire to focus on walkability and accessibility for all. Since silk is becoming a huge business in the southern portions of the empire, we'll be inventing superfine silk mesh sheets as mosquito netting through Trajan's wife and her weaving enterprises, before quickly popularizing the stuff as windows for people who cannot yet afford glass. And holy hell, are we going to abolish lead-based infrastructure. The pipes were lead, the aqueducts were lined with lead, the wine must seeped in lead pots, and the wine itself sweetened with lead acetate. That's sugar of lead. The Roman Empire during Trajan's reign was producing over 80,000 tons of lead every single year. And we want each and every single ounce of it out of the hands of the public. And like the lead cookware mentioned earlier, firmly in the hands of the government in big central stockpiles for future use. From there, we'll introduce a strange imperial metric hybrid standard of measurement that works harmoniously to marry the systems used by the country that put boots on the moon and won 2 world wars with the weird, backward standards of measurement that the smaller, less important countries of the modern world use, alongside the importance of modularity and standardization in engineering and science. The new pipes of the empire will be made of stainless steel, the aqueducts lined with ductile iron with a ceramic coating. Everything will be precisely milled and measured, threaded and sealed, and the agralegians will learn a lot about maintaining the new infrastructure of the empire as it's being built. Undoubtedly, this will take nearly a decade to make major progress on, but, by the end of this video, cities like Rome, Augustodunum, Alexandria, Italica, and Lugdunum will all have modern plumbing systems, new building codes, and properly engineered civil districts that focus on walkability, affordability, and accessibility for even the poorest of the urban populace. They'll be new cities entirely, the first of a great movement of mass updating that will drag the Roman Empire kicking and screaming into the 21st century in barely a decade. But how are we going to track all of this? Obviously, we've established for a long time that the agralegians can take care of the inventory, the farming, the preserving, the logistics of rations. They even wander around the soldiers themselves and back them up in the field if absolutely necessary. But at this point, the roster of the agralegians, even at just 110 CE, is getting so gigantic that it's taking up a significant percentage of the Roman Empire's population itself. Don't get us wrong, everyone's very happy with the hilarious manpower being poured into feeding the world, but it can't last as a single monolithic organization. Things need to change. Maybe slowly, but they need to change. So we will be enacting the first fissioning of the agralegians just 8 years after its creation. At this point, we've had enough time to really start finding the best of the best in the agralegian rosters, not just across the board, but at certain things specifically. More than that, the first Cascade Rangers are now old enough to be serving the Emperor directly. The best of them will also be useful for this. We need a special agency, if you will, consistent of the least corrupt and simultaneously most mathematically and fiscally capable individuals throughout all of the Cascade Rangers and agralegians. About 10% of their number will come directly from the Cascade Rangers, who will maintain field assets and carry out big busts and the like. A, secret service, if you will. The remaining 90% of the organization will take its people from the agralegians, and those staff will maintain the day-to-day operations of tracking, monitoring, managing, and collecting all taxes, as well as administering imperial revenue code and stamping out economic corruption wherever they can find it. While their initial numbers will originally come from the Cascade Rangers and the agralegians, of course, they will eventually start recruiting on their own. They will be trained to be tireless in their duties, entirely humorless in the face of resistance, rabid in their determination to find the source of any and all discrepancies, and they will always get their man. They will be known henceforth as the Imperial Revenue Service. And under their jurisdiction will fall a new economic system for the Roman Empire to adopt. We will construct a central bank system to update the already present money-holding system of the Roman military and invent a modern accounting ledger system as the new imperial standard for monitoring transactions. The central bank will work with the agralegians to decide the essential values of all manner of commodities that the Romans regarded as extremely important, and maintain a constant platform for competitive buying and selling of these products through the public. A rudimentary stock market, if you will. Perhaps most important, however, they will hold commodity money like gold and silver for the people, while distributing and popularizing paper money, made out of a mixture of cotton and wool, like classic American bills. Also, like classic American bills, we will use the same allotments. Vespasian will be the face on the 1, Nerva the face on the 5, Julius Caesar the face on the 10, Trajan the face on the 20, Augustus Caesar the face on the 50, and ourself on the face of the 100, Benjamin Franklin style. Sorry guys, but we simply must humor a bit of self-aggrandizement. Like old Benny Boy, never the leader, but definitely on the money. Like here in America, these bills will have serial numbers, and the government will actively discourage the use of any other forms of paper money that isn't distributed directly by the bank itself. The aristocracy will be encouraged to carry it around to feel fancy, and to be safer on the roads. Meanwhile, the plebeians who receive paper money from the upper classes for various goods and services can go to the government-sponsored banks being quickly set up around the empire to be traded in for other forms of money if they so desire. That being said, it will only be so long until paper money becomes so useful that it will start to eclipse the heavier, easier-to-steal commodity money materials, and gradually all of those commodity materials will centralize themselves in the bank. Oh man, but if we're gonna have the imperial revenue system out there in force, totally revolutionizing the way the Roman economy works, geez, we're gonna have to fuel them. Yes, since we took the Arabian Peninsula just 4 years ago, we should probably introduce and popularize coffee and tea. Camellia chinensis, you see, is easy enough to grow in good circumstances, and it would have been cultivated in our own gardens for the last 12 years, with modern cultivars brought from our own collections. But it's been something we've been slowly working up, so just like so many other things, until now, over a decade after our arrival, we think that we haven't had the background crops to really start sharing it. But now we do. And not a moment too soon, as the Imperial Revenue Service is going to need to stay up all night long, staking out the secret meetings of corrupt officials, or even just staying up doing paperwork. To be sure, the military will be the main benefactor of coffee and tea, however. Every soldier, sailor, logistician, and agri-legionnaire will get it in their morning rations as quickly as possible. You have no fucking idea how seriously important a good cup of hot stuff is first thing in the morning when you wake up in the middle of a dreary nowhere land, expected to get yourself out there and plant some trees or dig a trench. Or, you know, maybe you do. After all, you're from the modern day. These guys are just discovering a whole new world of caffeinated delight. And while it's going to take a while to secure the supply, probably around the middle of the decade, you can bet your ass we're getting hot cocoa going as soon as we can. But back to our friendly fellows in finance. We don't think we've gone far enough, because the Imperial Revenue Service can be used to produce propaganda. You see, these guys are functionally incorruptible, and we make sure of that with regular audits and inspections. They're specifically chosen for the inherent genetic trait of frothing at the mouth when they hear that someone pinched a penny for their own personal pleasures. They've been selected, some of them from birth, for their incapacity to smile when someone chuckles nervously in front of them and cracks a bad joke, trying to distract from the obvious lies they're being told. And some of them, about 1 in 5, is an emperor guarding killing machine that's been raised from infancy by the emperor to have an extremely dim view of people getting in the way of the smooth running of the system that saved them from the slavers. So they get this cool benefit of being handed a bunch of printing presses to tell people how, at this point, the state spends indeterminable amounts of resources every year on the health, education, safety, satisfaction, satiation, and stability of the people at large. The state has become the highest provider of charitable services in the literal world. Corruption, therefore, directly stands in the way of the state helping the people, and so the corrupt should be regarded as those who stand against the people as a whole. If you have committed a financial crime, not only will the main body of the service find any and all discrepancies in any and all ledgers, no matter who those ledgers may belong to, and not only will the field agents of the Imperial Revenue Service find you personally and drag you kicking and screaming into the court in the shire in which you dwell, to certainly face the full extent of the law, but the Imperial Revenue Service will then publicize all confirmed and convicted cases of corruption for public consumption, and any offenders, you, will be lambasted in the public eye, guilted and shamed for taking part in a scheme that invariably directly attacked the state, and thus the people. Agri-legionnaires and state-employed medicae in every community will have a vested interest to report discrepancies, with their accomplishments in rooting out corruption rewarded by being featured in state news and propaganda. Trusted messengers and dedicated Morse code operators will be assigned to receive these reports and disseminate them to the rest of the empire at large. The propaganda will truly reach new heights quite quickly by labeling corruption as a form of parasitism and an intellectual failure of the common people which stands against duty to the state and rational logic, core values of the Roman culture. Corruption causes famine and inequality that overwhelmingly damages the economy and stability of the nation as a whole, which is, by all means, some kind of treasonous. And those who stand strong against corruption should be known by the state and the people at large for their service in helping to maintain the health and safety of all people within the borders of the Roman Empire. Henceforth, administrative officials shall be promoted based on their merits, quantifiable, data-backed performance via progress gained in the field, health metrics, lack of audits, and so forth. The Imperial Revenue Service will be that which holds our economic system in place and keeps it afloat, tirelessly monitoring all of the numbers throughout the Empire. With coffee. They'll post the newspapers, deliver information to the people about the economy at large, and uphold the honesty and seriousness of the Roman economic system. With coffee. They and they alone know what the numbers really are behind the curtain, and their mission is paramount to the long life and administrative capacity of the Roman Empire. And coffee is paramount to that. And while they take care of all of this cool stuff in the background, select portions of the agri-legions who have not joined the Imperial Revenue Service will be assigned to the heavier study of medicine. In fact, we have enough people under our purview, both agri-legion and just sort of general employees, that we can start aggressive experimentation with vaccination, variolation, and attenuation. We want to find out, in our lifetime, how to eliminate as many diseases as possible. And that means we have to start using the animals from the domestication program as attenuation subjects for vaccines. We have to start setting up an extremely thorough medical peer review process that will drastically expand the medical standard in the Empire, including but not limited to designing a new type of hospital that more accurately mirrors our own, rather than the more spiritual environs of the hospitals of yesteryear. Just the designs for this hyper-sterile medical research environment might take a year to get proper, and years longer to make the building template commonplace throughout the Empire. But what matters is active medical experimentation and peer review. This is not going to be some Unit 731 Mengele shit before you start typing fast in the comments section down below. We already know some foundational rules of modern medicine that will ultimately preclude that sort of thing from ever happening. However, it will be the world's first, most complete system of comprehensive medical trials in history. Within the first wave of medical experimentation, we'll sprinkle in already established modern scientific understanding to give small targets and encouragement to the younger students, ensuring that the beginning of this medical scientific revolution is not one that merely stumbles around. The medical mania of the Roman Empire will go from swaddled in the crib, secure and comfortable, to outright running across the house grabbing anything that moves. And in case you think we can't really advance the Roman Empire all that far in medical knowledge by ourselves, like we've done with so many other things, you're correct. We're not a modern doctor. We've become a doctor in the Roman Empire, and we have no doubt that any well-known internet doctor person would be proud of the progress we've made in that time. But medicine is not a field you can do alone, and we're not formally trained in the field in any way. That is what our big collection of books is for. You see, there's this cool medical text called the Merck Manual of Medical Information. It's really cool, and you can get it online for like $17 sometimes. There's also the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, updated in 2022. That's traditionally a bit more expensive, but we can still find it online used for about $20. These are a couple of the most important books in our inventory, and we've absolutely translated and replaced them en masse for the benefit of the Roman Medicae everywhere in the Empire. And with all of the great information within them, and all of the other little snippets and books we brought back, we think we can very much restart modern medicine from the ground up in the Roman Empire. We've been working on building the infrastructure up at this point for over a decade, and now the population at large can start to help. And the motivation to become an agri-legion doctor is very high. Not only are you feeding the nation, but you'll also be maintaining the health of all Romans by advancing medicine and ensuring that what medicine is already around is effective and not a fucking scam. There will be speed bumps, certainly, but it shouldn't take that long for the peer review process to really start refining itself, especially with the fast advancement that we're already doing. Hell, while we're at it, let's just make sure to give them the secret of blood typing. You know, just to avoid any of those pesky problems we found with early blood transfusion. Just like with Africanized bees, we already know the signs, and there is literally no reason not to just give that one to the Romans to avoid accidental loss of life. Within the next 5 years, this will lead to a vested interest in developing the microsyringe, and the invention of blood transfusion probably by around 115 CE. Hopefully such a process will then catch on and become commonplace by the end of this video, lauded for its potent life-saving reputation, so long as it is performed by someone who knows what they're doing, and with folk that have matching blood types. Okay, so that's all still in 110 CE. It might seem a bit ridiculous to think that we could get all of this done in that time, but remember that we already have uptime textbooks and blueprints. Most of these big breakthroughs are collaborative efforts that we'll assign to lower institutions who we nominally oversee but mostly just hand off uptime information and instructions, managing from afar. We don't need to directly watch over all of this. We can tell people what to do and give them a diagram on how to do it and wait for the results. You'd be amazed at how many modern-day processes are extremely simple and easy. They just require a hilarious amount of labor hours that a single person could never hope to stack up in any reasonable amount of time. With a much larger and more eager work base provided to us by the Roman Empire, these long-term projects won't require that much personal attention, which of course gives us time and leisure to fiddle around with more complex inventions, like the combustion engine and electric motor. You see, our solar power plants are already what amount to steam engines. The sun heats them up, and that heat is used to turn water into steam, which turns a crank that pumps out water at 6,000 gallons a minute. From there, we can, of course, come up with coal and oil-burning steam boilers that can do the same thing to make pumping power on demand. But the combustion engine is a touch more complex, and the electric motor is its own sort of beast. However, at least for the electric motor, we already have the solar power plant. We could just use those power plants to turn turbines instead of pumping water. Hell, we could hypothetically do both at the same time with a bit of efficiency loss. As for our combustion engine, that's our own personal project we've been fiddling with in the background for over a decade, poring over ponderous tomes covering eldritch subjects like auto mechanics, and special parts casting. Down in our workshops, we've been spending some time inventing leaf springs and other high-quality springy thingies, flywheels and porcelain insulators for spark plugs, crude lead-acid batteries to power the reactions necessary to keep combustion engines going for extended periods of time. We're not a mechanic, or we could have, without a doubt, gotten this done much easier, and much earlier. But now, with the benefit of the Bessemer process, we can pump out custom-casted parts, make drastically different hardness for various parts, and experiment in privacy. Long story short, by around 110 CE, we'll wow Trajan with the first vehicle with a liquid fuel combustion engine capable of carrying a single man and his dog at speeds as fast as any horse. The length of test road is prepared for a man to race the best horses in the Empire. The engine, once properly proven, will be shown to beat this horse at speed and distance, duration, and capacity. Because, you need to understand, this isn't a rudimentary combustion engine with an impromptu chassis made from ideas and hope. This is the Willys MB Jeep, a quarter-ton military utility truck from World War II, and its blueprints are publicly available for all to see online. A squad of American soldiers could see one of these things dropped onto their position in a big wooden crate and get it built and running in less than 5 minutes, thanks to interchangeable parts and a streamlined construction, the likes of which, well, let's just say they don't make them like they used to. We'll say that. Don't believe us? Look it up. Willys MB Jeep built in under 4 minutes on YouTube. Pause the video and check it out if you got it. We'll wait. We good? Aye. So this is the fantastic vehicle we'll introduce to the world as of 110 CE. A decade of work in Trajan's workshops in our spare time to create the ultimate horseless carriage 1,800 years ahead of time. There are some stumbling blocks, and the first couple of years will present a rocky start wherein we'll have to hammer out all of the kinks. Of course. But that first race will absolutely convince Trajan, and anyone else watching, that there's something here. And from there, we'll start to work on refining the concepts and mass production of the design for military purposes. And it doesn't even weigh 2,500 pounds. That sort of thing can hypothetically be lifted above an enemy position by a hot air balloon of sufficient size and lift. Without yet having invented the airplane, we can already start dropping trucks behind enemy lines if the wind lines up properly. Yes, we know. Hot air balloon stalls are a very serious problem, and this sort of dangerous activity could absolutely get hardworking ballooners killed in action. But, alternatively, have you considered not bringing that kind of negative energy into this wicker basket while we're lighting this flamethrower, and that we just invent the parachute instead? You know, just in case? Aye. So we'll need to go a bit further. We'll make a double-chambered rosier balloon with an automated butterfly valve to avoid stalling out during the extreme ascent after dropping off over a ton of cargo from the bottom of the craft. This will be a dangerous operation, even with all of these potential failsafes, so only the best of the best will be assigned to drop trucks behind enemy lines from untethered balloons. To be sure of things going well, trained ravens will be used to find the thermals and updrafts, plotting courses ahead of the balloons so that pilots can make altitude adjustments as needed. And of course, the parachutes. They'll be necessary to airdrop things anyway. Soon enough, with the introduction of propellers and fans, we'll be able to hopefully steer these ships even better. But that isn't coming this year, what with electricity just becoming an available source to toy around with in only 110 CE. And what about the wheels? A Willys MB Jeep will shred leather tires in no time at all. So we need to use our tropical African territories to harvest African rubber and other latex sources that can be vulcanized and used for tires. While we certainly already have a source, we'll petition Trajan to start new plantation systems in Central Africa that will provide rubber not only for the trucks but the bicycles and carts of the Empire. Slowly but surely, things are starting to truly modernize. And while these amazing uptime technologies are too valuable to simply throw into the hands of the common folk, you can bet your ass that the agri-legions and standard military soldiers will get their opportunity to learn to drive. Now, with the important stuff out of the way for 110 CE, we can finally get to the fun things. We've already established in the first episode that we'd invent TTRPGs, and we think now is the best time to do so, what with all of the orphans who will eventually join the Cascade Rangers coming to the right age to start playing that stuff. Perhaps more importantly, we could popularize a lot of various different role-playing systems and wargames for the common soldiers and agri-legionnaires to have fun with in their spare time. This isn't just a great way of having fun as a group and keeping people connected out on campaign. The peripheral effects of popularizing TTRPGs and wargames are to help our soldiers better consider fields from a top-down position, and to test out various different strategies before ever taking them to the field. While it is certainly quite, academic unless one actually knows about the field in question, and the old guard will certainly sneer at such childish games as waste of time when one could be honing their skills on the real field of battle, the canny will learn to apply it in due time. Worst comes worst, this is just good, clean fun for the whole family. We can entice the Roman people to get into reading and math by releasing cool books that help them use their brains and imaginations, while giving them freedom and agency to make cool things and express themselves. Hell, we'll even be introducing a new form of craftsmanship. Miniatures. Now to waste the time of painters all over the world. Forever. And of course, to do that, we'll need to invent and mass-produce the graphite pencil. Cedar of Lebanon and or juniper make decent wood for pencils that can be viably shaved down with a knife, and some of the purest graphite in the world can be found in Borrowdale, England, which itself lies within the borders of the Roman Empire even at this point in history. And even if it didn't, it will soon. And we are already starting to bring in Congo rubber to make erasers after vulcanization. However, in the absence of erasers, we can use a pebble of pumice stone that's been dipped in wax, held in place by a little metal holder just like we have with modern erasers. With paper becoming a much more common occurrence under government production, paper and pencil will become a new normal in everything from academic work to military record-keeping, inventories to playing games at home. We can't even begin to cover how pencils with erasers will be able to help people in drawing maps and environments for logistics and reconnaissance. And obviously, we don't intend for any of this to be done irresponsibly. The system is already in place to have big old plantations for this specific sort of wood to make sure the environment isn't destroyed due to our need to take feverish notes. And on the idea of taking notes and writing things down, books! We told all of you in the very first video that we'd be taking a ton of fiction back in time and translating it into Latin so that we could start an authorial empire. We were not lying. While we've been spending the last decade or so pumping out textbooks and manuals, it's about time we start focusing on fiction work and our own personal authorial enterprise. We have Lord of the Rings, the complete works of Shakespeare, A Song of Ice and Fire, Earth's Children, Discworld, the Dune series, the Zealey sequence, Brave New World, and everything Heinlein and Asimov ever wrote. And so much more. While we will have selectively chosen some books to be translated into Latin, particularly those which directly translate well due to their setting and genre, we will mass-produce a lot of them in modern English, a language we'll see quickly eclipsing Greek as the language of scholars and academics. After all, it already uses several Greek roots in its vocabulary, but continues to use the Latin script, making it far more accessible to the common people in this ongoing Latinization and homogenization of the Roman culture. And as literacy rates skyrocket, thanks to new schools being built and staffed by well-trained teachers all over the empire, people will seek accessibility over eccentricity every time. And so, even though most of the books we bring along will stay in English and writ, we will still be flooding society with them all the same. Goodbye Greek, hello English. And of course, all of these books will make people think. They'll put stars in the eyes of the Roman youth to think about the possibility of so many impossible things. Of robots and computers, spaceships and aliens, life on other planets, and travel faster than the speed of light. Alongside the last decade of scientific and medical literature breaking out onto the scene, now They have the imagination of uptime, modern literature, to fuel their hungry, highly educated minds. Complex prospects can be described through the lens of characters and concepts not normally considered in Roman society, like Meg Murray of A Wrinkle in Time, a stubborn, awkward girl who ends up becoming a leader against all odds. Or like Cosmos by Carl Sagan, providing a look into the staggering immensity of space and time, educating the future generations on just how wonderful and extraordinary the universe really is. These works will blow the minds of the Roman public once they reach out into the mainstream, and it won't be difficult to get them out there. Believe it or not, due to the time-consuming and laborious fashion of writing books back in the day, there actually weren't that many books in the entire world. Now don't get us wrong, there were still probably like millions of books worldwide, maybe even tens of millions. Xenophon famously wrote well over a dozen works in his own time that we know of. Sappho of Lesbos was known to have written out perhaps more than 12,000 lines of poetry in her lifetime, which were composed into 9 full-sized books by Alexandrian librarians. And many other authors were possibly even more prolific than they were. But books back in the day were generally much shorter than they are today. Back then, a whole book would only be around 60 to 90 pages in our modern printing style, and it would almost certainly be broken up into numerous different volumes that would be traditionally acquired separately rather than compiled into a single codex. This means that even the size of a modern book, word count for word count, is about 3 times larger than one you might have expected back then. And a single author can produce far more content in one lifetime than any back in the 2nd century. Just look at Stephen King, over 70 novels, Dean Koontz, over 140, James Patterson, over 400. And these aren't even the biggest players. Check out Corinne Tellado, over 4,000 books. She published over 300 million words in her lifetime. That's an average of 13,000 words a day over a 63-year career. Something tells us that the average Roman just isn't going to compare, especially when you consider that we'll be punching out considerably more even than that. Not to toot our own horn, but we have several thousand books in our collection right now, some of which are particularly sizable. Earth's Children at only 6 books is like, what, 1.5 million words already? Tolkien's Legendarium is well over 1 million words at this point, and we're bringing all of that back. You think we can't do this 100 more times? Oh boy, you got another thing coming if you think we can't just keep listing this shit off ad nauseum. So let's move on and just assert that we'll be putting Corinne Tellado to shame by ripping off the complete and total modern collection of fiction we've already got. Some things we'll happily insist we didn't make, sure, but most of it? Yeah, we totally wrote that. Just some stuff we made in the background on our many travels on this nifty typewriter thing we've invented. Because obviously we're going to invent the typewriter now. Why wouldn't we? And finally, yeah, we've crawled all this way and still haven't gotten out of 110 CE. Trajan's getting a bit old. And unlike us, he doesn't have 3.5 decades of modern life to keep him young and healthy in the background. He died in 117 in our own timeline from a stroke, probably comorbid with tons of other conditions that he had to fight throughout the bulk of his earlier life, and we've had to work hard to correct everything about his lifestyle to extend that timeline. In fact, it's probably a constant fight to keep him healthy, even after vaccinations and curing his malaria. We've got this guy on a workout schedule, a specialized diet, constant mental exercises, daily low doses of aspirin, tea instead of wine, nutritional supplementation, and English language lessons to keep his brain all plasticky. Entire fields of medical science have been invented whole cloth just to keep him alive 1 year longer, 1 month longer, 1 week, 1 day, even 1 minute longer. From geriatrics to physical therapy, endocrinology to oncology, orthopedics to psychiatry, we've been developing these fields for a decade on people ahead of Trajan's age with the expectation that we'll have to deal with these problems when he gets older. Literally the entire Roman population is a test bed for this man's personal health and longevity. And of course, for our own as well. We are 10 years younger than Trajan, so what benefits him invariably comes to benefit us as well. Though we cannot stress enough that we will age better than just about any Roman thanks to a lifetime of modern conveniences before ever coming back in time. Even still, there is one concern in all of medical science at this point in history, and that is to make Trajan live longer. The doctors of the world may convince themselves otherwise. They may rightfully tell themselves that they have never met the emperor, and never will, and so doubt that their progress can do anything to help Trajan live longer. But they all come, invariably, from a much bigger world than the systems they're working with. They are unable to really imagine what they are building. It's all work to them, going in a direction they can't quite understand yet. Sure, the benefits are already becoming quite clear with time, but the true insidiousness of it all has not yet hit them. All of it is secretly to keep Trajan alive. All data used to update a medical system, all but entirely contrived to elongate the life of one single man. No new therapy or treatment used on him will be unperfected. Strange new illnesses and classical ailments alike will be found in the elderly and focused on as a matter of public charity under the guise of caring for the older generations who built Rome into this glorious civilization capable of making such amazing technological leaps in a single lifetime. Hell! We'll even do our own part after the invention of the microsyringe and start giving our own blood for the sake of letting the doctors at the very fringe of medical science study the many immune agents within for the development of better vaccines and treatments. No reason to be greedy, right? But just to be safe, Trajan is no longer to go anywhere where Roman roads and infrastructure don't meet. We know, he's only getting into his late 50s, but we will insist that he may no longer travel outside of the borders of the empire. Now, those borders are expanding every day, but we need to keep him in appropriate locations where medical support of the highest order is always present. It might seem a bit stifling to him, but every minute counts. Every year we can keep him going is another year that we can stick to the plan. Another year without having to alter things due to some nobody who knows nothing about what we're really doing together. As said in the last video, Trajan alone knows the extent of what we're doing, and even he doesn't have the modern perspective to really grasp what it all means. And with that, we clear up literally the first year of this video. Believe us, like in episode 1, the bulk of it's at the beginning. For the sake of watcher convenience, we'll have a little year counter up at the top left henceforth. We'll always be there to show you where in the timeline we are. So, moving on! Let's get to 111 CE! First and foremost, we're going to make differential metal tempering a major priority for a lot of various workshops we've got in our employ. We want different parts of the same piece of metal to be different hardnesses and of different qualities. In the modern day, this is fairly commonplace, but back in Roman times, the idea is so nebulous as to almost not make sense if we don't consider all of the build-up we've done so far in getting the Bessemer process going. But it is outright required for our long-term purposes, and we want to get this out there basically as soon as possible. You can actually make a blade where the edge is ultra-hard and the back of the blade is softer and more flexible from the same piece of metal, and vice versa, and verse versa. With that in the background, we also want to invent the electric fan and electric heater. Heaters and fans are super easy, literally the first things ever invented to be used universally with electricity. Fucking everything comes from these, a heated coil and a rotary propeller fan. If we wanted, we could just stop here and let society do the rest of the work. Humanity would gradually make all of the same shit we've got going already. Tons of technologies work that way. That being said, we have no vested interest in stopping now. We're the architect of the fucking future. These gears just got turning. And to emphasize that, there's a total solar eclipse on January 27th, 111 CE that passes through Sudan, Ethiopia, and Somalia. Just as before, we will bring Trajan there and set up a big festival. People will know a year in advance, and those who are able will be encouraged to go to the southern reaches of the empire to see it in action. We will mass produce and pass out shade glasses to help people see the eclipse as it happens. And we will make a great speech of how these eclipses work, how they are easily predicted, and not the realm of the gods. And a great display. We will specifically call out the dimming of the sun, announce the eclipse proper, and then call out its ending as it happens, like a prophet of old. And then we shall announce the next solar eclipse. On June 1, 113, a total solar eclipse will pass through the bulk of Europe and all the way to China. And then in November, an annular eclipse will pass over Madagascar. The people will be encouraged to follow them, to see them where they are, and realize that this is no divine statement, but a purely predictable astronomical event that can be followed. And with that, we will have made the Eclipse Chaser. And that is a part of human culture that runs itself, we can assure you. So from there, let's look to conquest. Proper conquest. While the general integration of the Americas and Africa is a more passive affair, mostly accomplished through slow civilian expansion, we have plans for Eastern Europe that will be considerably less peaceful, and the Bosporan kingdom must be the staging ground for that invasion. Now, historically, the Bosporan kingdom was not only a perfectly adequate friend to Rome, but was also at the head of a specific cost-benefit analysis that always left Rome unwilling to integrate them entirely. The Roman Empire could have incorporated the client state at any time, but the Bosporan kingdoms were capable and loyal clients to Rome, providing a buffer state against the nomads and ensuring good grain trade every year. Taking the area fully would involve too much work with the technology that Rome had to keep the nomads away, and it would never return the money put into it. But this is different. We have much stronger defensive technology, faster communication and transportation, better infrastructure, and agrarian methods than the kingdom could ever imagine. And a plan. In 110 CE, King Sarmates I finished erecting a temple to Aphrodite, and now is a time for Rome to use that to celebrate the joining of two peoples. With an altered version of the Roman Compromise, Sarmates I is more or less forced into becoming a direct subject of Rome in 111 CE, though he and his family will retain their status as governors, so long as they never turn against the Roman people, for no less than a century after his death. Immediately, the agrillegions will be assigned there to start turning the Crimean Peninsula into a paradise, watered with desalination stills. While a conquest in name, not a single shot will be fired in this endeavor, and indeed there will probably be quite a bit of celebration as Roman goods come flooding into the market, with food being all but free thanks to the growing national surplus. Sarmates will not be dragged to Rome to be strangled in front of the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus. Oh goodness, no! He will be gently and kindly escorted to Rome to give a glorious speech to the people in front of the imperial palace of how excited he is to join the vaunted ranks of Roman civilization. For too long, the Bosporan kingdom has been merely a client of the Romans, led by the lover of the Romans. Now it is time they become Romans themselves. And with that, we'll clear the east and make room for the single largest amphibious landing in human history. With over 1,000 ships setting off from the shores of England, the Roman navy will surround Scotland, Ireland, and the remaining British Isles in force, and will simultaneously disembark numerous legions onto the islands from all directions, alongside their agrillegion support units. While certainly a difficult foe to fight back against in the rugged Scottish Highlands, the people of the British Islands were fairly disunited at the time, and Rome historically almost took the entire thing a couple times. With the Roman Compromise in play, and numerous legions coming from north, south, east, and west, the native clans of the Scottish Highlands and Ireland will be unable to unite fast enough to resist the offer of good health, better food, and a more stable life. Why go off to the next several clans and argue about what they should do in the face of Romanization again, when you can just take a good month of preserved food for every man, woman, and child under your purview? Medicine, good educations, and weapons. The list of advantages to joining Rome at this time goes on and on. And as the compromise gradually chews away the coastal clans and sets up firm defensive infrastructure and Roman cultural order, the less populous inland clans will gradually be starved out and overtaken by their now Roman integrated. Their former coastal enemies will start entirely replanting the British Isles, commanding all of the resources and needing nothing in return. At some point, very quickly, once the coasts have been pinned down, the inland clans will be left with no other choice in the matter. They'll be unable to reach the outside world, and their allies will all be turning cloak to feed their families better. Roman agriculture can outproduce anything they have in the islands, and you're guaranteed citizenship and land, so long as you spend 25 years planting trees. It's a very low-risk career with a very high reward. Even the reward for just joining is so great that it will be difficult for people to turn down. We'd like a free doctor, full vaccine panel, a month of free food, and a guaranteed education for our kids. That just sounds pretty good, all things considered. Imagine how enticing it is to a British islander in the early 2nd century. So this invasion will, at most, take a year. The land we've taken here is simply too fractious and disunited, and the Roman compromise is too tempting on an individual level to turn down. With the might of all the new technologies we've brought, it will be difficult to sneak up on the Romans, improbable to win against them in any engagement, and impossible to resist their advance for long. While we certainly don't doubt that the Gauls and Gaels, Picts and Scotii can put up a good fight, the fact of the matter is that their weapons cannot penetrate Roman armor or shields at all. First and foremost, Malagasy silk is stronger and more durable than Chinese silk. A 5mm Bessemer steel background, covered by around 30 layers of Malagasy silk cloth and a diagonal twill weave, can shrug off a modern 5.56 round, and several layers of silk on the backside can catch the spalling. More compelling still, this new body armor would probably only weigh about as much as the armor they had before we arrived. It's a trade-off of the same weight for far more protection. But wait, there's more! We can stretch a dozen layers of dyed silk of the same weave over the average Legionnaire's shield and make it functionally proof against modern 22s. Better yet, we can actually change the system of the scutum entirely as well. We will shave down the 3-layer plywood design of the scutum to a 2-layer design that sandwiches a single sheet of Bessemer steel about 1.5mm thick and covered with a dozen layers of Malagasy silk. This will weigh about the same as the old scutum design, just as the new armor weighs about as much as the old Roman suit. But it is composed of far better materials and made with superior uptime techniques. And because we can mass produce all these things by punching them out on water-powered drop hammers, we can hypothetically crank out enough suits of armor to cover the entirety of the Legion in just a few weeks. If given enough resources and manpower to maintain the machines day and night, of course. Which you better believe we're doing whenever possible. While we certainly give it to the British Islanders that they are powerful and dedicated foes, they almost got completely conquered by the Romans in our timeline. If you think they'll be able to resist numerous bulletproof legions taking the islands from all directions with hot air balloons, well, you've got another thing coming. And with English coal and graphite, Scottish gold and silver, Irish zinc and copper, we can really start fueling some fun industries. At the end of the day, the conquest of the remainder of the British Isles is not a real war. It's a drastic success of the first test of the Roman compromise on a grand societal scale. Without true political unity, the common people of the British Isles cannot capably resist the mass propaganda of our leaflet campaigns, and they cannot effectively mount an offense against the might of Roman shields and armor. The simplicity and precision of the Roman compound crossbows are easily able to level on an enemy and end them even when put in the hands of a novice. And the standard of Roman weapons is far greater than ever before, more than a match for barbarian armor. And we cannot stress enough that this won't be a singular movement. Ships will land every 50 miles before filling up their hot air balloons to create a coastal Morse code network that will let any single landing force communicate to any other in a matter of minutes. By the time the natives of the British Isles have any idea what's going on, half of them will have already taken the compromise and joined the ranks of the Empire without a fight. So awed by Roman logistics and technology they'll be. While the idea of an enemy surrendering after merely seeing the Roman army at work had already happened multiple times before Trajan was ever born, this will be the first of a military standard in the new Roman way of things. The Romans will march up on a village or tribal capital, ask if there's anything important on, that hill over there, ask about a different hill if there is something important, shell the fuck out of it if there isn't anything important on it. Then, see if the potential enemy gives up. And when we say shell, don't think we mean firearms just yet. The fact of the matter is that Romans had all manner of siege equipment they could load up and destroy anything that displeased them. The Roman ballistae could get so big that the legionnaires could play target practice with people on the other side of the Danube by throwing trees at them. So with a little assistance from our own technical books, we could almost certainly create full-size trebuchets and other absurd works of engineering that could make Roman scholars as hard as hormonal teenagers. Go ahead, put a fort up and laugh at us from the inside. Many have tried before, but the Romans of the past often just built ramps to the tops of their fortresses and flooded over the walls on foot. Ask yourself if you think these Romans are any worse off than Caesar's. We think not. And with that, 111 CE comes to a close, and we have the entirety of the British Isles on our side in a single fucking year. With that, Britannia ceases to be a total shithole, where a sixth of the entire Roman military is stored just to keep the barbarians down. Now, Britannia is one of the most important mineral provinces in the Empire, and the people there will be well-fed, healthy, and happy to work in a fairly simple career with the aid of modern machinery to keep them safe and alive on the job. Let's roll forward to 112 CE. As already mentioned earlier in this video, we'll be getting the finalized designs for the modernization of Rome, Augustodunum, Alexandria Italica, and Lugdunum. We also have an Antioch, but that Antioch design is far more fantastical than you might think. Let's wait for that. The designs themselves are good, and will probably take a year or so to run through the Quality Control Brigade. In the meantime, we'll be finishing the invention of those micro-syringes and starting to make vaccines of things you stab into someone's arm, rather than a cross-shaped slice they cut you open with before rubbing some nasty shit all over you. Now, with the invention of the micro-syringe and other related medical equipment like the bifurcated needle, we can standardize and mass-produce vaccines for the entirety of the Roman military and agri-legions, to be a thing everyone gets as soon as they sign the contract or take the Roman compromise. With this, camp fever is no longer an issue, and the age-old killer of armies, disease, no longer threatens the bulk of our people. We have spent over a decade making every possible vaccine we can, and are doing everything we can to increase the size of that list. Every disease our soldiers don't have to worry about, and the enemy does, is a disease that we officially now own as a weapon. Historically, disease killed far more people in war than the actual fighting. Now we just set up tents and wait for the sickness to take the enemy for us. Obviously, sickness will still be present, but plague will never be a problem for the Roman people. Not ever again. If you want that for yourself and your loved ones, just stop fighting and take the Roman compromise. And to help in the upcoming wars even more, we'll make a serious update to the telescope with some funny markings, better casing, modular attachment device, and yeah, have a scope for your compound crossbow. While not the biggest advantage, it still gives basic guidance to novices to better and more accurately shoot once they actually have the understanding of how scopes and rangefinders work. And let's not stop at the military applications. Losing one's sight was a constant complaint of the people throughout the classical world. It's not a Roman problem to go blind with age, but a human problem. And some of us don't have terribly great vision to begin with. With some fiddling and updating, we could hypothetically invent the first eyeglasses. And just as with so many other technologies already mentioned, vision aids like glasses are one of those things for which you can show the most rudimentary examples and let society take the reins. Once people know that concave and convex glass lenses can drastically improve their vision if smoothed and polished correctly, civilization at large will see the vested interest and do everything it can to perfect the technology in as short a time as possible. Obviously, we'll give a few nudges along with the development of bifocal lenses, and we'll probably imply that polarization of those lenses and the like can cut down on glare and all that, but wildly, this is a field we don't have to do much for. Once eyeglasses are a thing, the rest of society will eagerly adopt them and perfect them for us, if only for everyone else's personal benefit. Now, finally rounding off this year, we're going to journey back in time to all of our glorious acquisitions in the last video. In 106, we took all of the Arabian Peninsula, and every drop of oil that comes with it. And we've been talking about doing various distillation experiments to make kerosene, gasoline, and rocket fuel. We've even used that stuff to make the first car, the Willys MB, or as the Romans probably call it, the currus automaticus, the self-moving chariot. Now, to really take advantage of all of these cool chemicals we're introducing into the Roman Empire, we're going to construct a system of chemistry workshops in incredibly isolated regions away from groundwater or any other fashion through which potential runoff might find its way back into the environment. There, we can do all manner of cool experiments on everything from making new chemical fuels, solvents, inventing UV lithography, refining silicon, inventing the clean room, probably making lasers at some point, inventing the vacuum tube. You know, the list just kind of goes on from there. Naturally, we are doing our best to preserve every potential byproduct made in the process of inventing and mass-producing dangerous chemicals. However, accidents do happen, and if we're going to have to face that reality, we're going to have to put the highest production centers for these chemicals in, unfortunately, the least pleasant and most isolated places in the Empire. The rare few contracted to work long-term in these sort of situations will be granted pay and reward equal to the Cascade Rangers, until the processes carried out in these workshops are perfected, and the safety standards raised beyond dangerous levels. And again, we can't stress enough, everything possible will be stockpiled, meticulously labeled and preserved for use in processes we invent later. There will be no waste. The mind reels looking back at history and remembering that people were making gasoline for decades before they ever started using it for anything. It was just a waste product they poured down the drain and let run off into the nearby rivers. Now, gasoline is the fuel that runs global society. The loss that we could make by haphazardly dumping some random chemical instead of storing and labeling it cannot be overstated. From those workshops, we'll do things like reinvent our precious carbide lamp and its most necessary calcium carbide fuel, allowing us to trade in the temperamental heliographs we've been using to communicate with Morse code across the Empire and replace them with long-lasting, pure white light that shines through haze and allows for much clearer communications from the top of a hot air balloon. We can make all manner of simple petroleum products to bolster our already growing industrial might, and we can even start putting together some more advanced chemicals and polymers. Down in the deep deserts, we undertake a terrifying experiment with extreme potential consequences. You see, we know some things. One of these things we know is aluminum oxynitride is so powerful that it can stop a 50 caliber armor-piercing round with about 1.5 inches of the material. An aluminum oxynitride, ALON for short, is clear. It's literally transparent aluminum. Now, we don't have mainstream aluminum production yet. At the rate we're going, the Hall-Héroult process won't be feasible until the early 120s. But we do have amazing solar focusing technology now using Bessemer steel, which we've been developing and perfecting over the last decade. We can make the dust necessary for sintering this material together by burning phosphorus to eat all of the air in a nearby chamber of alumina and leave only nitrogen behind. From there, we can perform some basic chemical reactions to give us aluminum nitride. Then, hydraulic presses and water-powered drop hammers can maintain 15,000 psi while using a series of high-reflection steel mirrors and molten salt boilers to create a single hotspot to center all of the powder together at over 2100 C for several days. This is a big trick. Probably the biggest trick we've pulled off yet. Our standard converters cannot do this, and Alon is not for the standard soldier just yet. Instead, it is explicitly for special forces and experimentation only. We want to test out Alon windows, Alon body armor, Alon habitat material, Alon seals. Most importantly, Trajan himself and his Cascade Rangers will be given body armor laminated with Alon so that no weapon on Earth can hurt them, provided it strikes a plate. This takes our steel armor and shields to the next level. Over time, of course, the ability to produce Alon at an industrial scale will grow, and its applications will be expanded considerably. But for now, we have very little choice but to use the stuff as the world's most fascinating bulletproof vest for the Emperor and his personal guards and attendants. Now, moving right along to 113 CE, we have a pretty busy year ahead of us. This is the year that metal-hulled rivercraft will be functionally perfected and rudimentary combustion engines used to drive them up and down the waterways of the Roman Empire. While they are still small, functionally just speedboats, they are extremely useful in bringing small amounts of men and supplies to specific areas at a moment's notice, and their capacity to deliver messages up and down the rivers of Rome is second to none. Moreover, these things are loud. Roman operators and passengers are encouraged to wear ear protection while piloting them, but the morale effect on the enemy is immense. You can always tell when a Roman patrol is coming down the river, and you better hide if you don't want to be seen, because a single speedboat can hold an entire contubernium and their dog, all of which are armored up and ready to kill 10 men for every one among them. And on the electronics front, we have a very special event going for the logistical and economic security of the Empire. You see, so far we've got vegetable matter on lock for the entire world. We could hypothetically feed the world on a classic lacto-ovo-vegetarian diet right now. Add in the rabbit meat, and you're getting a well-rounded world of properly fed people. But we can do better. Because of our contributions in the first video, the Roman Empire currently uses Egyptian egg ovens to breed birds on an industrial scale, which consistently hatch out half of all of the eggs put into them. This is incredibly impressive for a technology invented in the 2nd century BCE, but it pales in comparison to the modern cabinet incubators with automatic egg rollers that can universally hatch 95% or more of fertilized eggs put into them. With the advent of the electric fan and heater, we've had the last year to fiddle around with valves and gas releases to better control humidity and heat conditions without necessarily needing precision measurements. Moreover, we've refined the thermometer and its contents to better gauge appropriate temperatures. Not only will these new, perfected incubators help with the food and animal production of the Empire, they will do wonders in our journey to domesticate the elephant bird, the dodo, and other amazing animals that were lost to extinction in our own timeline. We no longer need to let nature take its course as we advance toward genetic supremacy over the natural world. Then, of course, the Great Eclipse of 113 CE will sweep across the bulk of Europe, Spain, France, and southern Germany getting a spectacular view of the sun being blotted out entirely. As we are going to be doing other things at the time, Trajan will have specifically been schooled and trained to deliver fantastically thematic science speeches during these events to give the Roman people the illusion that he is just as technically and scientifically apt as we are. This will make science look easy and accessible. Even an old man of the old guard will make it look easy. Easy to learn, easy to communicate. This is, of course, a ruse. Science is fucking hard, and Trajan will, no doubt, not understand much of his script. But it will make the most excited and eager people come forth and start doing it themselves. Some kids watching him give that lecture during the eclipse will be absolutely broken by it. They'll never have any interest in anything but astronomy for the rest of their lives, and they'll go on to become the next Carl Sagan or Isaac Newton or Katherine Johnson. That, if you ask us, is worth every second of the showmanship and script. That sort of lies at the crux of the fact that sometimes it is acting that inspires reality. And Trajan was a good old boy Hispanian. He understood the importance of a good speech, and he was apparently witty and gregarious. He's certainly the sort of person who, if asked a very scientific complex question, would blurt out, "That question is so elementary that even my personal attendant can answer it." All the while, of course, knowing that his personal attendant is a PhD astrophysicist who is playing at being his aide because it allows the man to guard the Emperor far better and more easily. An act, perhaps, but one that serves a purpose toward reflecting reality, while also bolstering Trajan's public persona as the real brains behind this entire operation, the man in charge at the head of every decision in dragging this world kicking and screaming into the future. We might be the architect of the future, certainly, but Trajan is the commissioner of the future, the father of the people. We're just that cool uncle that works with him in his garage on whatever next project he's punching out. Uncle Shy, of course, has their own enterprises, but we're mostly known for coming on by, lifting the kids up into the air and spinning them around a bit, having a good dinner, and then spending the night out in the garage with Trajan on some new project nobody can hope to understand until he gets out. In this way, sending Trajan out to start taking care of Eclipse duty, we can also be freed up to take on much bigger things. You may not know it, but the Scandinavian people were friends to Rome. Not in the traditional sense, like there were big alliances and whatnot, but rather in the loose cultural trade sense. You see, the Scandinavians were on the other side of Rome's traditional northern enemy of Germania. The Baltic is also full of amber and good iron, which the Romans went crazy over. They just couldn't get enough of the stuff. Suitably, a lot of trade was done up in the north, and a lot of Roman traditions, fighting styles, and even gods slowly migrated up and started affecting Scandinavian culture. The Northerners were good to have flanking the traditional Roman cultural nemesis, and with soft power, the Roman Empire could apply pressure to the north of Germania without having to send any fighting men themselves. This kept the fractious tribes and clans of Central Europe divided and always looking other directions, which is good for Roman security. But that's not going to do anymore. Rome already has excellent relations with the fractious tribes and clans of the Baltic, and has for nearly a century. The Jutes and Geats in particular were well attested to do good trade with the Romans, and the Roman compromise, as established before, is an incredibly tempting offer. But the Romans have something that can bring even more to the table: a familiar face. As established in the first and second videos, we're a 6.5 foot tall modern embodiment of Thor. During the bulk of this episode, we'll still be rolling around in our 50s, and we've made the Joe Rogan picture comparison already. We'll have over a decade of physical lifestyle training and constant travel, maximum health coverage, and an incredibly good diet. We'll be large and in charge, but also we'll carry that wizened look that people like. Strength, but also knowledge and experience that draws respect from those who know better. With that in mind, we will be the one to get on board those accursed ships and travel to Scandinavia to unite the peninsula as a fellow northerner under the Roman banner. And it won't be difficult to do this. Scandinavia was extremely sparse, and not at all unified in any formal way at the time. The population of the entire Scandinavian peninsula during the Viking Age, centuries later, after a huge population boom, was only around 2 or 3 million people. Hell, the broader Nordic region today only has around 28 to 30 million people. So imagine a Scandinavia that only has a tenth of what it has today, that's Finland too, and then remember that the Romans are dealing with an even smaller population, maybe no greater than 1 million people for the entire greater Nordic region. We won't be marching in against strong, independent, well-established Viking nations. We'll be dealing with tribal holdings a few thousand people strong. Like in the New World, this is a matter of cultural population pressure rather than conquest. In a single year, we can divert enough agri-legionnaires that they will outnumber the natives of the region entirely. And we can, one tribe at a time, convince the people that this is just way better for them. These were agrarian societies that lived off the land, so you can bet your ass they'll be jealous of the farming we might be bringing to the table. And we hear you asking, how are we going to farm all of Scandinavia like the Sahara? Easy. We know about these things called hardiness zones. And, as it so happens, during the Roman warm period, which would last for nearly 300 more years, the world was globally around as warm as it was between 1960 and 1990. That means we can actually use the same hardiness zones as we do in the modern day, meaning that Scandinavia never technically even gets as cold as Zone 1. And oh boy! Look at this! A comprehensive list of 20 trees and shrubs per zone that grow over 2 meters tall, often up to 5 at minimum, and have a crop value from Zone 1 to Zone 6, covering literally every zone in Northern Europe until we get down to the glorious Highlands of Scotland. Oh man, could you even imagine we had this 120 strong list of crops to make the Arctic into a forest? Why did you think we'd ever stop? Of course, this entire thing braids into itself. Obviously, Zone 1 only rolls around in single-acre plots for the most part, with every acre having 20 trees which alternate and randomize throughout the Arctic. But once you get into Zone 2, that number clearly doubles, and we work with 2-acre plots, following the same rules. Then Zone 3, the agroforest is back to 3-acre plot cycles just like in the original layout for the Sahara, though by this point it's very important to remember that those original lists in the Sahara have probably bulged to hundreds of different crop trees. By Zone 4, it's 4-acre plots that cycle out through 80 different crop trees, and by Zone 5 it's 100. You can see where this is going. As some plants stop being able to be cultivated because things are getting too hot for them, other plants step in and take their places. Inevitably, this agroforestry plan, which we've already explained at length, will be an all-inclusive method of perpetuating and cultivating literally every plant on the entire planet for whatever use we can get out of it. Every weed and algae, no matter how seemingly trivial, will be recorded, harvested for seed, and cultivated in controlled conditions to ensure nothing ever goes extinct again. While we might have a few problems right now with making that a reality, it is only a matter of time until we reveal the solutions to logistics and space requirements. For now, just know that we're growing anything we can and gathering any seeds we come across. The initial setup, you see, was fairly simple and lacked overall production diversity, but eventually the agri-legions will be lacing together environments of tens of thousands of different plants, personally balancing the ecosystems literally by hand. And Scandinavia is important for more than just territory and resources. It's cold and mountainous. Here, in the frozen north, with the long winter and the midnight sun, great mountain fortresses can be dug out to store gigatons of preserved food. Here is where much of the extra food that we don't have room for on the continent will go, and great supply lines along the Baltics and through the rivers of Europe will distribute the food to those who need it. The Alps were a good, temporary solution to food storage limitations, but with Scandinavia in hand, the options become far more expansive. And now that Denmark and the bulk of Scandinavia falls under the Roman banner, taken in clan by clan with the temptation of infinite food and the responsibility over it, we have the capacity to strike at Germania like we struck at Scotland. We have the capacity to strike at the region from all sides. From the west through Germania Inferior, from the north through Denmark, from the south through the Alps, and from the east through Dacia and the rivers of Eastern Europe. This allows for the single largest advance on enemy territory ever attempted by Roman soldiers, larger even than Caesar's conquests of Gaul, and will take 2 years preparing for it, training and getting the doctrine updated enough that we can potentially sweep the region in a single year. In November, of course, Trajan travels to the African east coast and Madagascar to deliver news of the annular eclipse and explain things about it alongside his well-studied guardians. And then we'll come back to Rome from the north as he comes back to Rome from the south in December to have a wild and wonderful end-of-the-year celebration that will bring most of the recently integrated no end of good feelings about having accepted the Roman compromise. Let's turn the clock to 114 CE now. Wildly, this is a pretty dull year. Most of it is spent managing ongoing projects and the integration and Romanization of various different territories that may or may not have been a tiny bit resistant in some fields. Don't get us wrong, with the amount of food pouring into their hands, most recently integrated Roman subjects will have their mouths far too full to be complaining audibly. They'll be exchanging itty-bitty acts of passive-aggressive resistance through graffiti or small bits of civil disobedience and disruption. And those problems, while numerous and requiring direct attention, will keep Trajan, ourself, Hadrian, and many other officials running back and forth across the empire throughout the year. Some Jute tribe in particular wants this specific cultural allowance. The Kushites are bitter about how we kicked their ass last year. The dedicated elephant bird breeders want higher work safety standards to avoid being kicked to death by the stupid monsters they take care of. While certainly not terribly pressing when you think about them individually, it's important that we spend much of this year assuring the Roman population as a whole that this drastic period of technological expansion and societal progress will not leave them behind. Grievances must be addressed, imbalances in the system must be remedied, ledgers need to be tidied up, and standards need to be raised whenever possible. New ranks and various institutions need to be carved out, whereas others need to be stricken entirely from the rosters. And of course, while we'll do a few cute things like invent and mass-produce the reflecting telescope and microscope, as well as design a newly updated, modernized Roman workshop template, this year will mostly be for maintenance. Trajan will go off in November to eastern Turkey, taking over Eclipse duty wholesale at this point, but otherwise we'll just be running around for the year like a bunch of headless chickens, fixing this and tidying that, straightening up the administration here and expanding the sanitation system there. All in all, this should be considered a good year. But it is, in actuality, the calm before the storm, because 115 is going to be a big year. A big year full of big things, both wonderful and terrible. First and foremost, Eastern Africa is ours this year. Next year, at the latest. A Roman, starting this year, can walk on foot from northern Denmark to southern Africa and never leave Roman territory or actually stop walking on foot, with exception of crossing very large rivers on boat, of course. Reconstruction of Rome, Augustodunum, Alexandria, Italica, and Lugdunum start right away. All of the designs and such finally hammered out, and leading to the bulk of Roman urban society into the first stretches of the sanitary revolution. Better pipes, better sewers, wider streets, more balanced and utilitarian civil engineering, more accessibility. The list goes on, and you've already heard about all of this at the beginning of the video. By this time, the full transition to lead-free wares throughout the empire is also probably starting to take hold. Having a lead pot to mull your wine or anything with lead in it at all is getting rare across the bulk of the Roman populace, and seeing lead use in the cities is becoming entirely non-existent now that the old pipes are being torn out and replaced with stainless steel. Our medicinal greenhouse initiative is probably starting to become commonplace now, with every large community, any over a few thousand people in population, having dedicated state-run medical greenhouses where resident agri-legionnaire medics can tend to the overall health and safety of the people at large. Though these posts are not exciting, they are also small and do not take many resources from the state as a whole. Nearly every animal in the world now has a standardized, mass-produced kibble formulated specifically for their own needs based on species and breed. All of the hilarious amounts of extra food produced by the empire at large that cannot be adequately stored for human consumption instead goes into this, cooked and dried for nigh endless storage in the frozen alpine vaults of Scandinavia. The Roman Empire not only makes enough food that its people can eat free much of the time, even the dogs eat free. With this ultimately leading to a potential collapse of the agrarian food markets, you can probably see why we need to spend all of last year micromanaging the empire to ensure that doesn't happen. Mosquito net windows, in the areas where it matters, are now popular with the common folk, leaving the open window and shutters of the past behind and helping the overall health of the empire considerably with just a few sheets of fine silk mesh. Our experiments with hydrocarbon fuels at this point will also almost certainly have reached full production. Gasoline and kerosene are commonly used in military procedures and machinery, especially the new self-moving chariots that we invented some years before. Still not allowed in the hands of the common folk, these tools are regarded as the highest of military property, and will not be allowed to drive around on the civilian roads, hitting children and causing trouble through self-interested aristocrats like they were in our timeline. Single-rider vehicle infrastructure is not going to be the future of this empire, but it does allow the capacity to move hilarious amounts of cargo and people tremendous distances in painfully small amounts of time when deployed in a convoy. and already are the engineers down in the R&D department figuring out how they can make these trucks bigger and able to haul more ever longer distances. And while we have to avoid making too much kerosene or gasoline at the time, as we lack the modern storage methods to keep them from breaking down and denaturing while not in use, we have untold amounts of crude oil just waiting to be processed and refined at any point. And to store all that, we've designed a system of underground storage warehouses that will start construction this year, though the first facility will almost certainly not be done until late next year. Those workshops we were talking about designing last year? Yeah, the first ones are complete now. And they use steam and combustion engines to run the machines for sometimes hundreds of workers at a time, at least when water and solar power can't provide the torque necessary. With these updated workshops, we'll invent and introduce modern metal lathes, milling machines, drop hammers, upgraded converters, hydraulic presses, vacuum pumps, pneumatics, lifts, jackhammers, the list goes on. We brought so many uptime tools back from the future, and now we can reproduce all of them with these amazing new workshops. And these workshops will provide a new template for the future of Roman mass production. One of these things can punch out 100 trucks a day, and with time that number will only go up like a Ford assembly line, to 1,000 vehicles a day. For those wondering why we're planting just so many trees, it's to offset the hilariously environmentally dangerous industrialization we're doing. It's never going to get as bad as the modern day, but we do just want to get ahead of things here. We're going to start punching out pollutants here in the next few years, and the agri-legions were put into play with the goal in mind of offsetting that before it ever began. Blood transfusions now become a commonplace thing in Roman high society, with the advent of the microsyringe becoming a commonplace item, mass-produced for agri-legion and military medics to access at any time in the field. Stingless bees and cocoa are brought from the Americas to give new delights to our guys and gals out there serving the Empire. And this is all just in time because our boys invading Germania are gonna need that hot chocolate as they march through the shivering bogs of the Northeastern Empire. You see, in our own timeline, the Romans almost took Germania. During the time of Marcus Aurelius, Rome had the region on its back foot, and there were some pretty interesting things to consider that they might have done to take the region. While we won't delve too deeply into specifics, this is also not the only time that Rome almost took Germania. They had several opportunities, and almost did it multiple times before eventually coming to the conclusion that there wasn't much reward to it. However, we know better. We know that Germania and Eastern Europe are full of extensive mineral wealth and beautiful rivers to facilitate trade with the recently integrated Scandinavia. We also know that in the future, steppe tribes will pour into Europe and fuck absolutely everything up for the Roman Empire. To keep this from ever happening, a four-pronged invasion of Germania will take place that will annex the region from all sides. From the Oder River westward will become Roman territory, and from the Oder to the Danube is only around 200 miles, so close that real-life canals have actually been proposed for the gap. Now, we aren't looking to make an Oder-Danube canal, but we are looking to lower the total eastern walkable border of the Roman Empire to only 200 miles. From there, speedboats can constantly and loudly ply the waters of the Oder and Danube, maintaining constant patrols year-round as a reminder to all across the river that you just can't cross over to take any Roman land ever again. Since these speedboats move so much faster on water than men do on foot or horseback, we can afford to stretch things out rather consistently, and maintain only around 100 fortlets on the border, 200 miles long, spaced out every 2 miles to maintain visual range with hot air balloons and warning of enemy advancements days ahead of time. To add to a sort of psychological effect, every hot air balloon along the borders of the Empire will sport a single obvious eye, staring out into the enemy territory at all times. The barbarians on the other side of the Roman border will always know that they are being watched, for how could anyone think otherwise with a giant balloon eye staring at them from 1,000 feet above? Waiting. Monitoring. Preparing. And to that end, we will send 12 legions, 4 on each front, to completely surround and take all of Germania. Updated compound crossbows will make short work of the enemy, while newly updated Roman armor and shields maintain nearly perfect defense. Freshly invented power tools allow for even faster fort building, while the military hounds ensure that nobody can sneak up on them, and escaping forces are tracked down and killed in the holes they ran to hide in. Once again, the Roman compromise will also do wonders on this campaign. Believe it or not, Roman relations in Germania were surprisingly good at times. Many auxilia, as explained in previous videos, actually went across the borders to serve Rome and then sent money back to their families because the pay was really good and the benefits were all but guaranteed. With all of this food rolling out, so much that we have to literally make kibble out of it and feed it to the pigs, store it in giant underground vaults in the mountains of Scandinavia, and freeze it in monumental Yakchal systems in the Sahara that span miles at a time, plenty of Germanians who are already nominally on the Roman side will simply take the food, the medicine, the promise of education and good jobs that don't separate them from their families, and they'll tell their chieftains to go get fucked. And we're not gonna be helping the Germanian loyalist cause by dropping literally millions of flyers all over them showcasing the many benefits of Roman living, both written and artistic medium. Hell, we could just literally drop a truck on someone. Would be super funny, and pretty much anyone who sees a 1-ton crate fall on their buddy is gonna up and surrender. But Germania, sparsely populated, politically disunited, and severely outmatched as they are, is gigantic. The space from the Oder River to the current Roman borders is phenomenal, covering much of modern-day Czech Republic, all of modern-day Germany, some bits of Poland, and everything south and west of there. Even with the region completely surrounded in a 4-pronged super invasion filled with untouchable soldiers, speedboats, and superdogs, the actual full annexation of the region will still take a couple years. Tribes will have to be negotiated with on a case-by-case basis as often as possible to discourage native alliances. Agri-legionnaires will have to be the face of this invasion, even as a ton of heavily armed and armored thugs stand behind them, mean-mugging the barbarians as they consider the perhaps overly generous Roman compromise. But it goes further. We aren't doing enough with our flyers. Already in the modern day, we have party streamers and paper products that are not only fully biodegradable, but also impregnated with flower seeds and the like. With paper production as a state-operated industry, we could customize these flyers to become impregnated with seeds. But these seeds are not flower seeds. These seeds are hardy radish and sweet wormwood, clover, and dill. Even if a barbarian decides to casually discard these flyers, they cannot be ignored. Not weeks later, the rag paper made from countless scraps of cotton and linen across the empire will melt away, and the seeds will germinate in the soil where they were dropped. Even Roman propaganda will seed the world with food and nitrogen-fixing crops that improve life for all and prepare the way for the Roman advance. And while we're at it, let's completely and totally overturn the dye industry. It took 10,000 Murex scales to historically make 1 gram of Tyrian purple dye. That won't do. So we're going to produce mauvine from coal tar, being used regularly in our Bessemer steel industry, and altered to be different shades of purple with various different minerals. This will be produced on a major scale. Purple will be on every banner, incorporated into every courtly fashion, and added to every formal military show outfit. Purple banners will fly throughout Germania to show the audacity of Roman culture. In fact, with all of the mineral processes we're going through, dyes will become much more commonplace, and with them will come a new outfit in the Roman military: the fatigues. Camo patterns of all varieties have shown themselves to be highly effective in our own modern military history, and we've designed countless variants for different environments. With dye production reaching a fever pitch through the new chemistry workshops and coal industries, we can begin toying around with different patterns and popularize a whole bodysuit, much like the modern US Army, that will take our men from fancy classical soldiers in formation to a modern standardized military unit. Armor and shields covered in silk will be covered in camo patterns that will help them blend better into whatever surroundings they come across. It will probably feel strange to have such a different outfit assigned to them, but in time they'll grow thankful for the change. These military outfits are straight out of the modern day, with all of the benefits that come with them. Now, the Roman army, already quite an impressive example of classic military standardization, will become synonymous with unit cohesion and systemic integration. They'll still carry shields and crossbows, but those shields will be camouflaged to look like tree trunks or sections of bushy green area, like stones and bits of sand, like shelves of ice and sections of gravel, and the soldiers themselves will follow suit. In just 10 years, we've gone from a sleek and updated Roman military standard to modern US soldiers that happen to use shields and crossbows instead of guns and grenades. The barbarians literally won't know what hit them. And while the bulk of the empire is absolutely smashing Northern Europe right up into the Oder, we'll be settling in for a very big event. The 115 Antioch earthquake. An MMI 11 earthquake that killed hundreds of thousands of people, forces this intense melt the very land itself and shake it to a functional liquid. They topple even fortified masonry and tear huge fissures into the earth. The resultant tsunami historically destroyed multiple cities by itself. And to avoid this, we will be settling up an extended Saturnalia for 115 CE, the greatest Saturnalia ever held, and we will be holding it in the inland deserts of the region beyond Antioch, in an area that we've determined will be safe and capable of holding around 1 million people comfortably. This won't be Fire Festival, guys. This has been an event that we've been secretly planning for at least a decade. The site has been chosen to guarantee both safety to the bystanders and full view of the city of Antioch itself. There will be rewards for all who come, prizes and gifts, food and entertainment. Everyone, even the farmers and the prisoners, must go to this area. The cities themselves must be entirely emptied of their populations to come and join us in the greatest festival in all of human history. There, on December 10th, 115 CE, we will begin the trickle, and gradually have the agrelegions bring the elderly and infirm out to specially erected medical tents where they'll be given some of the best geriatric specialty treatment the Empire has to offer, as a gift from the Emperor himself, who has personally come to oversee the festivities. And, in what the Empire will regard as a sort of uncharacteristically public display, we shall personally show ourselves at the head of everything. The head honcho, the guest of honor, the star of the show, us, at the lead position. Though Trajan will certainly set up the shows, announce the events, and order everyone around to keep things working, we'll be the one making the big speeches, providing the entertainment, and carrying the celebration on our shoulders. Using updated seismometers, we'll be able to keep a precise eye on the ground, giving us up to 15 minutes to stop the celebration and call on the people to shout forth our greatest speech yet. For now is the time that the ancestors could have never foreseen. We have come far away to be a Roman, to take part in the world's civilization and enrich it how we can. Trajan, the father of the people and best emperor of all time, has welcomed us into his company and given us the opportunity to be the best Roman we can be, the best person we can be. And through that, we have helped Rome to become the best empire it can be. In just 15 short years, we have eclipsed the greatest cities in the world and designed them anew. Antioch was once one of the greatest and most important cities of the East, still is, but it represents an old way, a dying way that remains unsustainable. The might of the ancients was great indeed, but certain aspects of that elder society must be left behind. Already, Rome and Augustodonum are being slowly, methodically broken down for rebuilding, but at times wrath is necessary. Sometimes through the predictions of science and the progress of humankind, provided everyone remains safe and healthy, drastic measures must be taken. And while we will never pretend to be a god, a creature of the supernatural, a prophet of any sort, we are a scientist, and science can be used to predict and invent both the wonderful and the terrible. And while we cannot control nature, we can control ourselves in response to these predictions, to prepare for what we cannot control so that it may hurt none of our number, and only leave opportunity for the future. Only because of science are they now here, in this field, away from danger, as nature itself takes their homes, takes the old ways and renders them to rubble, as chance drives the waves of wrath upon their cities and drowns them in salt. As we give this grand speech, the land itself will shake, and the city will fall behind us. The tsunami will flow in and pull away the earth where Antioch once stood. The fires from the crowded streets will burn for days, and the entire time, nobody will get hurt. Every man, woman, and child will have escaped the wrath of nature, celebrating their supremacy over it. And Trajan will see us not only as a great inventor, but as a superhuman, with the understanding of an Illuminatus and the foresight of a god. As those around him descend into panic and woe, we will calmly continue our public statement and seem all the more triumphant for it. For this is not the last of our great predictions. And as 115 comes to a close, Trajan will know that our power goes beyond mere intellect and education, much as we shall not admit it. Yet. Antioch, having already been newly designed in the last few years, will be rebuilt at a speed and intensity the likes of which the Romans could have never imagined in their wildest dreams. Leveled, flooded, and burned to the soil, it serves as a completely blank slate for the city of the future. Located on multiple fault convergences and now marked to be built with earthquakes and tsunamis in mind, it will be the site of some of the first geothermal power plants in the world. A scholarly city literally built from the ground up to help the Roman people move forward into the future, while the other old cities are updated and refurbished without need of such violent upheaval. 116 is another easygoing year. Germania will be swept up in this year, and the rest of the eastern African coast will also be consolidated. Now a man can walk from the tip of Jutland to the base of Africa and never leave Roman territory, though most of his journey will be by ship if he's smart. The new Roman workshops have had a year to start pounding out extremely tiny and thin parts, casings, cartridges, and coils out of bronze, brass, steel, and copper. And the Empire as a whole is beginning a decentralized underground petroleum storage warehouse system that can maintain supply lines on any front and anywhere in the interior at all times. Literally, billions of barrels of crude oil specifically stored for on-demand refinement whenever they are needed. While the build-up itself pales in comparison to the mass production totals of the modern day, we've been collecting crude oil for literally a decade at this point. So our slow acquisition of oil suits us just fine, especially when considering that we have fairly few applications for the stuff at this early period. But once again, we're basically just going to have nothing of note this year happening. And so shocked by the events of Saturnalia the previous year, we have no doubt that Trajan might be a little quieter as well. There's a lot to think about and a lot to do, and there's a lot of land to incorporate responsibly into the Empire. 116 will certainly keep us busy, but sadly, there's probably not much to talk about. 117 CE, now that the German conquest is done, will simultaneously be both boring and exciting. You see, there's allegedly a comet this year. Back in the day, comets were objects of superstition and often portents of doom. This is the first comet we could find post-reflecting telescope for this timeline, so it's the first we'll really be able to capitalize on. Now, there might not be a comet, but if there is a comet, and Google got it right, we will personally name this comet Victoria, after the Roman goddess of victory, and explain what it is, how it works, where it comes from, when it will return, and so forth. And it will announce the beginning of the Roman expansion into the Chernozem, that being the black soil belt of Ukraine and the rest of Eastern Europe. With the highest concentration of organic matter deeper into the soil than anywhere else in the world, the Chernozem is the breadbasket of the world even today, subject to some pretty nasty conflicts as a result. If Rome could take hold of the Chernozem through a slow but steady and methodical advance northward from the Crimean Peninsula, it could take hold of the most fertile section of cropland in the world. Ukraine today accounts for nearly 9% of the Earth's total wheat supply. Today. So imagine how much good the agri-legions could do if they took hold of it in 116 CE. Or 117, we suppose. And all of our technologies for war and defense have been designed with the horse nomads of the Eurasian steppe in mind, with the Chernozem being the ultimate testbed for Trajan's one-armed man, the eventual war against Parthia. But of course not yet! The Victorian settlement of the steppe takes precedence, and will come to provide so much more than the Middle East ever could. With the understanding of comets in their minds and the portent of victory above their heads, the forces of the Roman Empire will slowly march into the Black Soil Belt and claim it for their own. It is time to be patient, time to be methodical. It is time to invent fulminates! We're not going to tell you how to make them, and we're sorry to tell you that looking it up on Google will only get you informed that the AI isn't allowed to instruct you on how to make explosives. But long story short, our chemistry labs and uptime textbooks will have figured out how to make the stuff by now, mostly using byproducts from previous processes. And down in our mechanic workshops in the south, advanced clockwork is finally coming out into the Roman public, with the introduction of pocket watches and mechanical timers. New mills and precision instruments now allow a sort of refinement of moving parts that was previously unfeasible in any field of engineering. Now, to the highest officers of the military, especially the artillerymen behind the ballistae and trebuchets, pocket watches will go. Scientists, surveyors, and engineers will also be given pocket watches to better keep time of things at work, allowing for greater precision and certainty in their experiments and the execution of their plans and designs. Alongside standardization of space, this will help the average Roman standardize time, while preventing the entirely capitalistic history of watches in our world leading to the overall ruination of personal lives and freedoms to live as one so desires. You see, back in the day, company leaders actually found a way to make clocks a tool of oppression, lobbying city governments to make it punishable by death to not work during standard clock hours, to ring bells during the morning to force communities to wake up and work, to lord over the people and ruin their former ways of life with the demands of aggressive capitalism. Not this time. Society is quickly reaching a balancing point wherein people don't have to work super hard. So well fed are they by previous years of labor that the lowest forms of scarcity are disappearing entirely around the empire, even as its borders balloon seemingly out of control. Land is being settled where it was previously thought nobody could live, and new animal companions are being introduced into everyday life that overwhelmingly improve and simplify the duties of the common people. New production standards are so phenomenally grand compared to the struggles of yesteryear that the average person only needs to work a short shift a few days of the week to maintain themselves. And even those working every day, like the agri-legionnaires, have fairly small workloads, instead spending most of their waking hours learning higher sciences like botany, medicine, and genetics. Because of this, there is no rat race of late-stage capitalism, and there never will be. The same pressures that formed them in our own timeline simply don't exist. Food is free, medicine is offered complimentary by the state, infrastructure is exploding, unemployment is gone while work is still easy, taxes are closely monitored, and corruption is culturally stigmatized. Companion animals are getting smarter, and there are a lot more of them. And the state is the number one entity at the head of societal progress, secular humanism, and scientific advancement over the entire world. Money, simply put, is starting to mean far less as time goes by, and the lowest bar is rising far faster than the societal ceiling can keep up, leading even the poorest Romans to live better than the aristocrats of just a couple decades before. Even Trajan himself does not yet understand just how much the world has been changed. To him, we are perhaps fantastical in nature, but we are still an entity from his own world. As the year of 117 CE comes to a close, however, we personally understand just how much time has changed, for the best emperor was never meant to live this long. We have not only changed history, we have rewritten it entirely. And so we reach the momentous year of 118 CE. This year, we invent safety glass. Not much, but important for saving future lives. But that is not the most important thing. Once again, mostly a consolidation year, we still have two extremely important events. First and foremost, a total solar eclipse passes through the bulk of Europe in early September, through southern England, over Belgium, through Germany, Czechia, and Slovakia, slides through Hungary, Romania, and Moldavia, then skips over the Black Sea to slam itself into the Crimean Peninsula before moving on over Georgia, Azerbaijan, and then into Iran to terrorize the Parthians. While their society falls apart at the overwhelming portent of doom sliding dangerously across their fucking sky, blotting out the sun, millions of Romans cheer on the latest predicted solar eclipse, one they can see across the bulk of the empire itself from old territories to new. The Eclipse chasers, spurred on by Trajan's visit to the new Germanian territory for the eclipse, will call it the Trajanic eclipse because it arrives on the month of his birthday. And the whole of the celebration is not merely for his birthday alone, but for the first retirees of the Agralegion. Signing their contracts after the official establishment of the Agralegions as a formal institution in 103 CE, 118 CE marks the year that the first women who joined are given their payments and legal independence. In the Americas, they'll be given land and title, the highest officers of their legions receiving the vaunted positions of governors and magistrates over the new provinces and colonies since cleared out by their efforts. Free from patriarchal oversight, thousands of miles away from Rome, they'll be given a lot of responsibility to maintain the faraway provinces of the New World while fostering peace with the natives and encouraging them to join through the Roman Compromise. For centuries, women of Rome were relegated to the position of breeding factories, but now, by the greatest man to ever lead and his personal confidant, they'll be given the same responsibilities as any man once considered above them, and unlimited freedom to establish their own subcultures and traditions as they see fit. The New World is a wild, vast, and foreign territory, and they have spent the last decade and a half learning farming, domestication, medicine, construction, and metallurgy standards necessary to both tame the continents and preserve them. And what's more, we need them. You see, the Americas actually provided a particular scourge of their own that we don't often hear about, even though it's ever present in our society and a constant worry of young adults everywhere. Syphilis. Syphilis, if you didn't know, is fucked up, and it comes from the New World, one of the few diseases we got from them rather than the other way around. It can incubate inside the body for years before slowly, sometimes invisibly punching holes in your literal brain, driving you actually insane before killing you slow and painful. Do not look up pictures. We cannot stress enough. It's not worth it. Don't make the same mistake we did. Well, the gals in the New World will be very much responsible for making sure syphilis not only never leaves the New World, but never leaves the second fucking century. There's no reason to preserve this horrible ailment, and if we can eradicate an entire disease out of existence before it spreads worldwide, we will. So the New World matriarchies will be instructed to hand out syphilis treatments for free the moment they see them. We, at this point, do have the technology to completely eradicate it. We just need to make sure the gals know the dangers and just how important it is. Nobody leaves the New World without comprehensive checkups and vaccination, health workups, and whole-body germ destruction with the height of modern medicine. We have the rare opportunity, right now, to delete one of the most hellacious diseases off the face of the planet before it ever gets free. No need to take the compromise for syphilis treatment. It's our pleasure. Honest, here, just take it, please. Any timeline without syphilis is a better timeline than the one we currently live in. Goodbye, scourge of society. But we hear you ask, what about violence in the New World? Well, that's not a problem. While women don't serve in the military, yet, they do still learn how to defend themselves in the Agralegions. They are required, as soon as they sign their contract, to carry out an extensive physical education schedule, encouraging general fitness, self-defense exercises, and target practice with their crossbows. They wear the same armor as the legionnaires and live amongst them during their duties, learning the tricks of the trade from real soldiers that make their career about fighting, while the Agro-legionnaires only make combat into their hobbies. Though not specifically warfighters, the Agro-legionnaires will still be familiar with all of the necessary combat maneuvers and self-defense techniques to put any native force to shame, no men needed. Indeed, all of these, 250,000 or so initial colonists to the New World will have spent their decade and a half working together, becoming friends, and otherwise getting ready to start this new life as a unit, which was the standard for retiring legions in the Roman Empire to begin with, so this is not weird at all, even culturally at the time. The strangest part about it is just that there are only a few hundred men in any given colony to start with, outnumbered hundreds to one by strong, well-educated, independent women looking to carve a life out for themselves in this fantastical new continent with fewer than 3 million native souls upon it. Over time, of course, men will trickle in, get their own land, get married to these gals, and so forth. And, of course, over time, natives will gradually join their peaceable colonies with pre-agreed upon parcels of land bought from the natives themselves. Native traditions and practices will be recorded, vaccines will be dispensed, crops will be traded, new syncretisms will form, and eventually, Roman culture will simply flow over the land and all of the other cultures, subsuming them into the whole and preserving everything that made them into the great libraries of the empire to never be lost. And, once again, more consolidation, more administration, more bureaucratic establishment, more infrastructural update, more recipients of the Roman compromise to process and integrate into Roman society, more teachers to train, more children to teach, more parents to win over, and more systems to enact. And trees. Always more trees. Billions of trees planted every single year. Billions of fruit-bearing entities grown by human hands to feed the entire planet. And this slow but steady march into the next generation continues into 119 CE, with largely nothing important to mention. Refinements of old designs and continuations of pre-existing plans, of course, but nothing important to invent nor any major social trends to popularize. This last decade has been such a hilarious change for even the lowest and most out-of-touch members of Roman society that it is good to have a year without even a solar eclipse or major event. Just for 119, the Roman Empire enjoys a quiet year. Slowly it expands, gently it swells, terrifyingly it looms over the other nations of the world, quietly growing in the most threatening manner ever possibly imagined. Peaceably. And so, as 120 CE rolls in, we come to the final year of this video. In July, there's an annular eclipse in South Africa that we will encourage Trajan to announce and attend, showing that the Roman emperor can be found from the northernmost to the southernmost portions of his empire, so long as it doesn't involve going on a boat. However, at this point, after nearly 20 years of greater and greater eclipse fervor, we can only imagine the need to explain these things away is no longer so pressing, and Trajan is doing all of this much more as a matter of public spectacle than of educating the populace anymore. Nobody ever again will be afraid of the loss of the sun. No Roman will ever again beg the gods to bring the light back and ask what they did wrong, to be plunged into darkness. And they will understand quite well what is happening, and their children will be taught about it in schools. Hey, let's talk about school also. It's been 18 years since we first started Trajan's universal compulsory education program through the Alimenta. An entire generation has been born, grown up, gotten educated, and become legal, modern adults with free, accessible community schooling by qualified teachers via standardized modern textbooks transported back in time before being mass-produced and supplied to them by the state. Suffice to say, the average high school graduate by 120 CE knows more about how the universe works than their parents ever could. The last generation is being left panting and gasping behind with the traditions and mythology of old, while the newest generation is growing up like the millennials of our modern day. They were born into the old world, the classical world, but they're growing up around the newest technological developments of the era, being taught all of the things their parents never even had the opportunity to learn, and advancing in ways their entire society never even imagined possible. Hundreds of thousands of orphans, formerly left to die or be enslaved every year, are now being raised up in a system of imperial child care centers called the Warrens by the Agralegians, to see Trajan himself as their actual father, as the man who saved them and brought them under his wing, extending the full power of his position to make sure they only had the very best. Even if they've never personally met Trajan or set eyes upon him, they are told every day that they are the children of the emperor and nobody else, and that the best of them, if they work hard, will be able to one day live at his side and gain his personal approval as they protect him while doing the duties they have the most passion for. Millions of people at this point literally owe Trajan their very lives, and they know it. Not indirectly, but directly, as he has adopted them into his own life. And in return for that, they have dedicated themselves to the maintenance and continuation of his legacy. They are no longer dependent on superstition and myth to explain the world around them, but are instead correcting their parents and taking on the eccentric rituals of the previous generations with logic and rationalism. And they're joining the military, now 18 and ready to show the world what they've got, ready to show the world exactly what benefits a modern upbringing can provide, even a strict one. Through the approval of this latest generation of educated and universally literate adults, a larger generation than ever before in Roman history thanks to the boom of free food and medicine over the last 2 decades, new horizons in cultural progress and scientific development are fast arising on the scene. Domestication experiments, now several dozen generations in for some species, are bearing results unlike anything we've ever even bothered to try in our own timeline. Now more advanced than ever before, the Roman Empire extends from South Africa to the Arctic Circle, from the Mississippi to the Maldives. The first Roman explorers in the Arctic are testing out the northernmost islands of the world, and new Roman colonies, almost entirely initially populated by legally independent women, are taking over the American Great Plains. Countless species, both plant and animal, have been rescued from extinction centuries in advance, and the secrets of space are secrets no longer, with entire generations of hobbyist astronomers coming to the fore thanks to the mass production of new telescopes. All the while, the biologists of the world are using new microscopes to see even smaller than ever before. Cities are being rebuilt, medicine is free, electricity is starting to come to the fore, cars exist now, speedboats guard the riverine borders of Eastern Europe, infant mortality is practically non-existent, and Emperor Trajan has lived longer than in our own timeline, with no chance of stopping anytime soon. Remembering that the Roman Empire during this time probably had something along the lines of 2 million births per year, of which half would die before 10, and none of them are dying now, and we've just pulled in millions and millions of people through recent conquests, well, the Roman Empire is well over 150 million people in population right now, rivaling modern nations like Japan and Russia, coming up on half of the modern population of the USA. That's the same as the entirety of China and India's population at the time. Combined. That's around the same population as the USA during World War II. With peer review and the scientific method becoming the standard baseline for imperial research, the technological progress of the nation is advancing at the speed of America during the bloodiest and most horrific conflict in human history. And you better believe that we're taking advantage of that, sprinkling hints and little scientific breadcrumbs everywhere we go, inspiring and encouraging the bright new minds of the universally educated generation to go beyond what they hear from us and other experts of our generation, and instead to blaze new trails into the future. And of course, those who perform the best will be sure to gain the attention of ourself and other great scholars helping usher in this fantastic era of progress and discovery. This year, the seeds planted by the agri-legions at the beginning of this video will produce enough food to feed over 1.5 billion people, as covered way back toward the beginning of this video. And every year thereafter brought even more plants to life. Another France worth of space and then some to supply the legions in their endless advance over the face of the planet. Huge portions of the Sahara are now covered in greenery and life, with the bulk of the Arabian Peninsula already forested and the frozen lands of Scandinavia quickly being planted. The climate, globally, is a centralized system, controlled by human hands via a careful balance of industrial production and agroforestry, with the seas of the planet cultivated to produce even more for the people and a limitless supply of meat flooding into the common person's diet to produce a taller, healthier, stronger, longer-lived breed of Roman who knows the struggle of the previous generations academically, but is starting to have a hard time remembering what it was like with their parents idly complaining in the corner about how it used to be. Lead has been completely eliminated from the Roman inventory and replaced with fine steel. The average soldier has standardized weapons that would be better suited in the era of pike and shot, while their armor would be more comfortable in the modern day thanks to composite silk and steel systems that can shrug off literal modern bullets. And we're just getting started. Because on September 18th, 120 CE, after a night of celebrating Trajan's 67th birthday, we'll bring him aside and we'll talk to him privately. We'll ask him if we can trust him. If we're really friends, or if we're just useful allies. We'll confide in him that we've always been uncertain where we stand in the Empire. We've done so much, and we've been present for so much progress. We've invented and improved the lives of so many, but can we really be regarded as a true Roman, as a real Roman citizen, not just some foreigner playing it off? Are we really a true friend of the Emperor? Trajan, of course, has known us for 20 years at this point. He'll have known us to be a suspicious sort, but our loyalty over the last 2 decades will have earned us the right to that suspicion. We've never steered Trajan wrong, and indeed have saved his life on many an occasion. We've acted as his advisor, his personal confidant, and his best friend over the years, raising him and his wife to previously unimaginable positions, and bestowing upon him the title of Father of the People, a title that is all too literal given the system we helped him not only expand, but perfect into a universal institution of objective goodwill and secular humanist values. Not only would Trajan call us a true Roman, not only would he cast shame and dishonor on any who would say otherwise, but, and you'll have to allow us a bit of pride at this point in the scenario, we might even think he would call us the truest of Romans. For our loyalty has been unquestionable for the last 20 years at his side. For our only concern has been to better the Empire and never to take it for our own, to never stop, to never rest upon our laurels and say that is enough, no matter how much others encourage us to do so. And if we need someone to call upon, if we are in doubt, our closest and most trusted friend is Trajan himself. Having been soothed and reassured, we confide in Trajan. We are not the person we've told him who we are over the last 20 years. We are not some foreign diplomat from a place on the other side of the world called Cascadia. Cascadia is indeed the region where we come from, but it is not a region in the now. It is a place yet to come. And so we shall show him that old crate, that fireproof, waterproof, airtight container that we've hid behind all of our spices and toys, along with that old case holding our secret firearm. Within is all of our modern paperwork. Our ID card, our social security number, our birth certificate, even some of our works from school that we've preserved over the years for our own sentiments. Now able to read English, Trajan can see for himself that we are not from this time, even if we are from this world. And the time we're from might as well be a different world entirely. Printed off copies of newspapers from the moon landing, Nobel Prize lists, and the accomplishments of their recipients, pictures of airplanes and submarines, reports and news articles, a history book on the Roman Empire covering his life specifically, his accomplishments, the quality of his character, and the nature of how he died. So much evidence to support our claim. And then we present to him that one mighty tool we've been holding back for 22 years, our final parlor trick. We present to him the bolt-action rifle. Trajan now has to accept that we are not a mere inventor. We are no mere genius of his time. But we are also no god. We are a single person, come back in time to rescue him specifically from his fate, who chose him personally to bring the Roman Empire to global dominance, to last forever. We reveal to him all that we have done for him, and all that we have done for his people. And we confide in him that we are not only not done, but that we're only just beginning. Everything until this point has been parlor tricks, has been mere flights of fancy, sleight of hand, basic engineering, things that are commonplace in our world. From here on out, we can no longer produce fun little trinkets and wow the Roman populace with fantastical creations designed to simplify their lives and make combat a little bit easier. We've been working decades to build up the infrastructure and invent the parts of these new wild devices we've been planning. We've been stockpiling all of the ingredients for the recipes to punch the Roman Empire into the age of trains, guns, and gasoline. And now Trajan understands exactly what he has to do, while maintaining the same public image as we've built up for him over 20 years. He has to hand over the wheel. And he has to do exactly as he has told. Because the very future is at stake. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you liked what you saw here today. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, share, go on down to our Patreon via that Linktree link in the description, and pledge even just $1 a month to help support the cause. And join the many, many ranks of all the lovely people here in the credits section at the end of every video. Get your ability to vote on things that we do on the Patreon and all sorts of other stuff. And, just help us out around here on the farm and stuff like that. Thanks again, once again, for coming. Please consider, checking out all of the other channels that we do stuff on, which you can also find in the Linktree link. Thanks a bunch one last time for coming. Stay safe, stay inside, stay healthy, and of course remember to help each other. Vote progressive, vote Bull Moose.